Y'all go. Y'all go.
For us. All right, let me connect this real quick. My voice is gone. I look raspy right now. I'm about to react to some scary stories real quick.
Every day I hear concerns about the Chinese Communist Party's growing influence in our state. I have opposed Chinese influence at every opportunity in my time in Lansing. I'm State Representative Andrew Fink, and I will continue to protect your interests over the interests of foreign governments.
All right, bro.
I was driving home from work one night around 9 p.m. midweek, so the roads were quiet. As I was driving downhill, I heard a sound that was like a jet engine roaring behind me. The next thing I know, a car goes flying past me going twice the speed limit. It looked like a fairly old and crappy car, and the car started to get the speed wobbles. Then one of the tires came flying off and rolled at high speeds downhill while the car spun out and crashed. I stopped my car to make sure whoever was inside was okay.
Damn.
A guy got out of the car and looked over at me and then started moving extremely quickly towards me. I don't know why, but I hit my internal locks on the car, which was fortunate, because no more than 2 seconds later, the guy started grabbing at the driver's side door and smashing on my windscreen with his fists trying to get in. I'll never forget the look he had in his eyes. I put my foot down on the accelerator and drove off back home. I decided to swap cars once I got home and drove back to see what was going on. I saw 2 fire trucks and about 4 police close to where the incident happened. When I got back to the crash site, the guy was no longer there, so I decided to head home.
So he ran to.
The next day at work, I was online and bored reading the news when I saw an article that shocked me. The article was about a guy who had been in a police chase for 1 hour, and the police stopped chasing him because it was becoming too dangerous. Turns out the guy was high on meth, had stolen a car an hour's drive away, and had been in a hot pursuit since. After crashing the car, the guy apparently crossed to the other side of the road and hailed the first car that appeared, which was a taxi. He got into the taxi and stole it. In the process, he pushed the driver out of the driver's side door, and the driver got stuck and dragged at speeds.
Damn,
The driver died from the incident. I called the police and had a detective assigned to me. He fingerprint checked my car and got a statement. I had to testify in the Supreme Court as a key witness in a murder trial. The guy got 30 years, and they told me that my testimony was one of the main factors in convicting him. I often think back to that night and wonder if I hadn't locked my doors, would I have been the one who got murdered?
Bro, that story was ass, bro. Story was ass.
So you think
Story was terrible. Not good. If you see the little red lines or whatever, I did not watch these. I had to go over them real quick to make sure I was able to stream it like it went on TOS. I did not watch none of these.
This incident occurred when I just turned 12. It was a big day for me,
I rate the other story 2 out of 10.
since we were going to throw my birthday
Actually,
party.
one.
Everyone in my house was busy decorating inside. A lot of my friends and all my family members were supposed to come, so I was pretty excited at that moment. Later on, almost everyone had arrived, and I was waiting for 2 girls named Saya and Alania. They were twin sisters whom I just met a few days ago.
Oh,
We weren't actually that close to each other, but I thought they were nice and fun to hang out with. So I invited them the day I met them on the street, and they laughed and said that they would love to come. In fact, I didn't really think about them and forgot about those twin sisters soon, since I was enjoying the gifts I got. A few hours went by. I heard a loud knock on the door suddenly, and when I opened the door, the twin sisters, Saya and Alania, were standing there and smiling. "Come on in." I greeted them and tried to invite them inside. However, one of the girls said, "We weren't expecting this many guests." At first, what she told me seemed pretty odd, but I didn't think much of it because they were too shy and didn't like being around too many people. So I introduced them to everyone in the house. Everything was fine until that moment. Not long after, they came closer to me saying that they have my present. It was the cake they made. It looked like a normal cake, but smelled really bad.
Oh no, see
And
that?
it looked like it was rotting for a long time. No doubt I felt disgusted. But soon, I decided not to judge by its looks, so I eventually tried one bite. To my surprise, it tasted really good. I proceeded to eat more and more, but then my eyes suddenly started to go blurry. The last thing I remembered were the twins' big creepy grin,
What the
and that
fuck?
I was dragged by them somewhere.
Oh, hell.
Then I passed out. I don't know how much time went by, but when I woke up again, I was in a hospital. I could feel my whole body hurting, and my parents almost cried when they saw me wake up. I was confused and asked the nurse standing next to me what had happened. Then she told me that a lot of guests noticed that I was gone at certain points on that day.
Nobody's seen the
They were
girls
looking
drag her
for
out.
me, and they eventually found me unconscious and beaten up terribly in our shed. My parents were shocked and immediately called the ambulance and the police. They asked everyone all kinds of questions, but then one of my friends noticed the twin girls were gone too. Eventually, they were found in my attic, hiding behind some big boxes. It was said that they were covered in blood and were smiling widely at the police. It turned out that the girls put the heart and the guts of a dead sheep, some small bones, and even thin, small needles in the cake I ate. And they also put lots of candies, chocolates, and some sweet things, so that's why I couldn't notice anything weird. It is said that the girls had escaped from juvenile a few days ago, exactly on the day I first met them.
Oh shit.
Fortunately, I didn't swallow any of the needles, but I had to suffer from food poisoning badly for a while. The doc told me I was very lucky to survive. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened to me that day if my family and friends hadn't found me in time.
Damn. Fuck no. This bitch is evil.
What'd you do? What did you do to them?
He's experimenting on people.
History is built on lines, and we must be willing
rate
to
that story
cross.
like
That's
a
compassionate use.
There is nothing
6 out of 10.
compassionate about what you
Not that
do.
good, not scary.
We used to have a maid from Indonesia, and her name is Wati. Well, one night it was probably around 2 a.m. Everyone was sleeping. Suddenly, my brother and I heard my maid weeping. She was crying softly. We thought she probably missed her family in Indonesia, so we just ignored her and went back to sleep. The next day, at the same time, around 2 a.m., she was weeping again. This went on and on for 3 months. And we told our parents about it, and everyone had the same thought. She probably missed her family back home. One night at 9 p.m., my brothers and I were chilling in the living room. My maid was in the kitchen washing dishes. My dad was fixing the kitchen light, and suddenly my dad saw a shadow running around in the storage room. My dad thought it was one of us playing around, so my dad called out to my brother, "Can you please get the light bulb from the drawer?" But no one answered. Then my dad shouted, "Hey, can someone help me out and get the light bulb for me?" Both of us ran towards my dad from the living room, which is on the opposite side of the storage room. My dad then got confused and asked us why we came from the living room. We got goosebumps and walked into the storage room. We switched the lights on and saw that there was no one there. However, we saw the maid shaking. She looked at us, then started weeping again. My dad asked, "Who was that, and why are you weeping?" My maid then explained that it was her guardian from Indonesia. My dad asked her to call him out, and he was going to call the police. But my maid stated that it was not a human, but a spirit that was summoned to protect her. After that, my dad brought us to a nearby hotel for the night and hired a spiritual hunter to chase the spirit away. Following that incident, we no longer heard the maid weeping, and she was sent back to Indonesia 3 days after the incident.
Yeah, bro, she gotta go. She gotta go. Okay, that story, I'm gonna give you. I'm gonna give that story a 8 out of 10 because it creeped me out a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
When I was 9, my father had died. I didn't know how and why. I was just sad about it. I soon got over it and would just look at the pictures I had of him. After some time had passed, I constantly saw him. Whenever I saw him, I told my mom, "Daddy's home, Mommy. Daddy's back from his long trip." Well, she thought those were recurring dreams, and maybe a sign that I wasn't handling his death well. Whenever I told her, she would just take me and my sister out to get some ice cream. I soon stopped telling her, because after we moved across the city where I lived, which is Reno, Nevada, I still saw him sometimes in my 6th grade class. One time, when my best friend and I were working during math class, I saw my dad sitting beside me. Then I whispered to my friend that my dad was right next to me and that he constantly followed me around. But he was different from how I remembered, because there was always a bullet hole on the left side of his forehead near his hairline. In the 7th grade, he still followed me around and always frowned every time he saw my stepdad either hitting me or screaming at me. My stepdad was kind of tough, so he did that to me sometimes. Whenever my stepdad would enter the room, he got mad at him. I heard my dad gently one time in a dream tell me that he had killed himself because of my mom. He said that my mom cheated on him and always yelled at him saying he wasn't good at being a father. Over the summer between 9th and 10th grade, I was in summer school taking the 2nd semester of Algebra 1. I was sitting at the front by the door when all of a sudden, something outside caught my attention. My dad was staring in through the window of the door. His eyes were empty. I was horrified being watched by him. He came into the room and sat at the empty desk next to me. And I knew that he was not the same. I felt something was going wrong. I've grown up now, but I still see him a lot. And he's always whispering in my ear and telling me that my mom is the one who should have died, not him.
Shit's creepy. 7 out of 10.
It was the summer
Let's see if any of these stories beat the record. So far, it's 8 out of 10.
before 9th grade. I was at my friend's family pool party, and there were tons of people there. At one point, while my friend, let's call her Lily, went to get some sodas for us, a man came up to me. I didn't recognize him, but since it was my friend's party, it made sense for me to not know everyone there. He smiled at me. He looked as though he hadn't shaved in days, and his eyes never looked quite directly at me. I stepped backwards, feeling uncomfortable. "Hello," he said. Hi," I replied. "What's your name?" he asked. I supposed that a first name wouldn't hurt, seeing as we were surrounded by tons of people in my friend's backyard. I'm Carly," I said. "What's yours?" "Rick," he replied smoothly. "Are you having fun with Lily?" Some of my discomfort eased. "I'm her parents' friend," he continued, stepping closer to my face. His eyes weren't focused, and his breath smelled like alcohol, even though it was early in the day. I grew even more uncomfortable and stepped away, waving goodbye awkwardly. When I turned around, he was gone. I told Lily about this, and she mentioned it to her parents. Her parents said that they didn't know Rick, which kind of freaked me out. But they told me that it could have been one of their friends who brought him over. So I shrugged it off and assumed everything was fine. After the party ended, Lily and I were having a sleepover at her house. Her parents had gone over to visit her elder sister to take some leftovers to her, since she had not been feeling well and couldn't attend the party. So we were home alone with her elder brother. Lily and I were playing a game in her bedroom when her dad called her. He asked her to please go and turn off the pool lights, since he had forgotten.
Oh shit.
Lily agreed, and we stepped outside into the backyard. I waited on the back porch, reading a text from another friend, while she went to turn off the lights. Once she was finished, we stepped back inside, locked the door, and went back upstairs to continue playing our game. At one point, Lily asked me to make sure the curtains were closed properly, and when I did, I happened to look outside, and I noticed that all the pool lights were on again. Lily?
Yo.
I asked, getting a strange feeling. You turned off the pool lights, right? Yeah, I did, she replied, coming to look. Now there was a figure swimming laps in the pool, even though we couldn't see his face. It's probably just Cody, Lily replied, speaking of her brother. Come on, let's go scare him. We walked down to the pool and slid open the back door. Waiting behind the bushes, we could see the top of his head bobbing in the water. We were going to jump out and scare him at any moment. But then I looked up at one of the windows of the house. The curtains were open. Suddenly, I saw the face of Cody illuminated as he turned on his bedroom lights.
So who was that?
It grasped Lily's arm, and we both knew the person in the pool was not, in fact, Cody. We hadn't brought our phones with us in case we would get wet, and if we ran back around, there was a chance the stranger could see us before we got back to the house. We tried to wave to Cody, but he couldn't see us.
Damn.
Suddenly, splashing in the pool stopped. My heart dropped and I could hear each of my panicked heartbeats. A hand suddenly gripped my arm and flung me forward, and I screamed, and Lily did as well. I looked up, and there was Rick. His facial expression I will never forget. I've never seen someone with such a creepy smile. I yelled, and soon my mouth was filled with water as he chucked me in the pool, and he actually held me underwater. I choked for breath and realized he had grabbed Lily's arm as well, although she wasn't in the water. He was strong and clearly ill. He yelled, "Time to swim!" Somehow Lily managed to kick him in the face hard enough to run away, slamming the door behind her. He continued to hold me, laughing as I flailed for breath. Just as I felt I was about to die, police sirens were heard on the surface. He picked me up and threw me on the ground, breaking my arm. He ran away. The police came and questioned me, but he was never found. I will never forget that moment. I thought I was truly going to die. Nor will I forget those creepy, unfocused eyes. From then on, I've been terrified to be outside at night, especially in a pool.
Like Roblox, the sandbox allows you to build your own 3D game.
Let me get that story a 7 out of 10. It wasn't scary. It was a good story, though.
Happened about 4 years ago, in December of 2015. Me and 5 of my friends have our own business editing photos and videos for social media content creators. And because of this, we tend to have a lot of spare time on our hands. We used to go on road trips to a local lake that has a few nice spots to camp at, and a ski resort. We usually went there on our days off. One week, the 6 of us finished all of our projects early, so we had a few days off. We decided to drive to the lake. I won't be using their real names for obvious reasons, so I'll call them Kevin, Steven, Brittany, Katie, and Josh.
Okay, this might be good.
Katie and Brittany rode in Katie's old sports car, and Steven and I rode on our motorcycles. Usually, Kevin and Josh took Steven's Jeep. But on this trip, Josh had just bought a new Sprinter van, which the previous owner had converted into a two-person camper, so Kevin decided to ride with Josh. When we arrived, we skied, had some really delicious camping food, and listened to Josh brag about his new van. It was a pretty normal trip. On the last day, we all packed up to head home. About 2 hours into the trip back home, we were a little hungry, so we stopped at a gas station to grab some snacks. We all parked our vehicles outside and went into the gas station together, which was kind of foolish. We were in there maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and the car's door was left open the whole time. When we came outside, we had a huge shock waiting for us. Josh's van was gone.
Oh shit,
There was a huge dent on the side of Katie's car and another dent on the side of an old truck in the parking lot, which I assume belonged to an employee. We were so panicked at that moment, so we immediately called the police. But since we were a little off the grid, the police took 15 minutes to arrive, and by then, we knew the chances of them being able to find Josh's van was slim to none. The scariest thing about it was that Kevin brought his work laptop on the trip, and I knew that Kevin didn't have a password set up on it. We waited for another 2 or so hours while the police searched the area, but they couldn't find anything. They told us to go home, and they would contact us if they found the stolen van. Kevin and Josh rode with the girls in Katie's car, while Steven and I rode our motorcycles, following them very closely. We didn't stop once during the remaining 3-hour trip home. Fast forward 2 or 3 weeks later, we received a frantic call
scary stories
from Josh. He said that the police contacted him and that the van had been found. All 6 of us showed up to see the van, and the van had somehow been rolled on its side and was left in a ditch near the highway, about an hour from where it had been stolen. Once they got it out of the ditch and flipped it upright, the police let us look inside to see if we could salvage any personal items. Sure enough, Kevin's laptop was gone, along with a set of kitchen knives that Josh had used for making kebabs. The most disturbing thing, though, was that once we got the busted driver's side door open, we saw that both seats were stained a deep dark red in multiple places, and the dashboard had slash marks all over it. At that point, we were really afraid of the van. Josh let the police take the van for further inspection, but we never heard what happened to it, or who the blood belonged to.
Open again.
That story was a 5
Happened about 4 years ago, in December of 2015.
That story was a 5 out of 10. Yeah, I think they all survived. Oh shit.
My name is Eric. I'm 31 years old, as well as a single dad living in a one-story house with my son, named Alex. It all started the night before Christmas, when Alex was 5 years old. Alex was so excited, so we decided to go for a walk around our town. We were walking down our road listening to the sound of carolers in the distance. That led us all the way down to the main street. When we came face to face with the 3 old women singing, I
turn your volume down, I can't hear you. What you mean you can't hear me?
took out my phone trying to record a story for my Instagram, just like other people around us. When I looked down, I saw my son covering his ears. I stopped recording, crouched.
I talk low. Okay, hold on. I think I might know what that is. Yep. How do I sound now? I sound better?
Crouched down and asked him what was wrong, but he didn't answer. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the middle woman of the 3 carolers was giving my son an evil grin with a large, creepy smile. She seemed a little bit weird. Well, it was a chilly December night, so I decided we would head back anyway. When we reached home, my son looked relieved. So I thought he just wanted to go watch TV, and catch up on his episode he thought that he might miss.
up,
Later, as I was
Cash Out?
cooking in the kitchen, I took a glance at my son, and I could see that he looked absolutely terrified. He was sitting straight up on the couch, which faced the TV. There was a large window next to the couch that had the curtains slightly open. Then he sprinted up quickly, ran to me, and just hugged my leg. "Daddy, she's here," he told me with a shivering voice, and I replied, "Who?" He exclaimed back, "The middle woman we saw when we watched the caroling."
Oh, hell no.
I quickly looked at the window, and there really was that old lady we saw not too long ago. I closed my eyes for about 1 second, and when I opened my eyes again, she completely vanished. Being freaked out, I called 911 naturally, telling them about what had just happened. There were 3 cops that showed up, so I explained the incident to them again, and one of the cops showed me a photograph that looked kind of old to me. She was in there. Then she pointed to that old lady, asking if this was her, and I answered yes. She started laughing. My son looked confused until I asked why she was laughing. She stopped and gave us a kind of serious look this time, but was still smiling. Then she said, "Hey, you know what? I know this is weird, but this woman died 3 years ago
What
on
the
this
fuck?
exact same day." My heart
That's
dropped.
not funny.
That's when my son looked terrified too. I tried to calm him down, but I couldn't believe what was going on.
Nah.
The other 2 cops came inside and said they found no trace of anything while searching. It made no sense. When the cops had left our house, I put my son into his bed and went to my room. I turned the light on my nightstand that was close to the side, grabbed my phone, and decided to check Instagram, thinking that if I could find anything, I would just call the cops back. I opened my story, and to my surprise, I couldn't find that old lady in there. I checked another story, and then checked another again. But in fact, it was just 2 women there singing. Feeling mixed emotions like scared, mad, and even more, stupid, I started checking some other people's stories from around my neighborhood. And still, she wasn't there. But all of a sudden, I realized something. When I was checking some story feeds, I ran into one story of some woman who was standing right next to me during the caroling. Where my son and I should have been standing was replaced by nothing.
Yo.
It was like we weren't even there from the beginning. I couldn't believe what I'd just seen. I put a hand over my mouth and couldn't say anything. That night, that Christmas day became the most terrible moment for us. Well, I'm 33 now, and my son is now 7 years old. But even if everybody thinks that it doesn't sound true at all, we both still remember it like it was yesterday.
Ah! Shit! Fuck. God damn.
Here's one thing.
Can't be yelling. My voice is already fucking going, bro. Fuck. God damn. The fuck up. There's no way you ain't get jump scared from that too. You know you got jump scared from that too. How am I dumb? You got jump scared from that too. God damn.
I was 26 years old when this incident happened. One day, I was
What's up, NL?
taking a walk with my dog Molly. After walking 2 more blocks, we saw 3 men smoking on the porch and talking to each other.
I don't like
2 of
this.
them didn't pay attention to me, but one was staring in my direction. He was a bit...
Okay, only because the other story scared me, I'm gonna give that story an 8 out of 10. Only because of the jump scare. I ain't get jump scared yet. I don't care.
Bigger compared to the other 2 guys. He looked like he was in his 20s and was also bald. I quickly looked the other direction, but then he yelled at me from behind.
Bro was at a church with the button up. Oh, no. I had put this on because I don't really have no other clothes to put on right now. I gotta wait to wash all of my clothes so I can really rock with right now. It was not a 10 out of 10, bro. It was an 8 out of 10.
Hey, gorgeous.
Not that good.
Nice puppy you got. Come over here and let me pet her. Then I heard laughter coming from the other two men, so I ignored them and rushed over to my house. At first, I didn't tell my parents anything, thinking that it wasn't that serious, but I was wrong. The day after, I walked my dog as usual, but because I was feeling a little bit scared, I took pepper spray with me. I walked past the same house hoping not to see that weird man, but he was there again. He was sitting on a rocking chair on the porch, and when he saw me, he shot up from his seat. In fear, I picked up Molly and bolted down the sidewalk, trying to get away from him. But to my horror, he was chasing after me. He pushed me to the ground, making me fall onto the hard concrete floor and dropping Molly. I started screaming for help, for anybody to hear me, but he covered my mouth. Clawing at his hands, I realized that I had the pepper spray in my pocket. So I grabbed it and sprayed it in his eyes, and after a while, he eventually screamed out in pain and rolled off my body. I quickly got up and picked up Molly. When I got home, of course, I frantically explained the situation to my parents. My dad, who was a retired Marine, wanted to go to that house, but Mom just told us to go to the police station. I told an officer what happened and showed him my injury, but they didn't really help me. A couple of months later, I started working at a 7-Eleven. One day, I was walking home after my night shift, and when I turned the corner, I noticed a truck driving slowly and way too close to the sidewalk. I didn't pay any attention at first, but when I was standing in front of my front door, I looked behind me and saw the same car. Two men were in the truck, and I could see that they were watching me. I told my parents again, and because of this, my dad was on the lookout in front of the house for a few weeks. Nothing really happened until that night. That night traumatized me, and the guilt still chokes me to this day. It was about 2 in the morning when Molly started barking at something out the window. Being too tired, I just shrugged it off and drifted back to sleep.
Girl, she's trying to let you know.
To the sound of Molly yelping in pain.
Oh, shit.
I opened my eyes and saw my dog's lifeless body on the floor, covered in blood, and a dark figure over her. It was him. Do you think you could get away from me? No, you were wrong. He climbed over me and started punching my face.
Damn.
With my blurred vision, I kept on kicking and hitting the man, but he didn't even flinch. And next, I heard him struggling to get his belt off. Pure terror swept over my body. I let out a scream before he could cover my mouth. All of a sudden, the door swung open. My dad held his gun in his hand, and my mom was behind him.
Alright, GG's, bro.
As soon as Dad saw the man, he shot him twice. The man screamed in agony, and I pushed him off of my body. Dad grabbed him and started beating him, showing no mercy, and Mom called the police. I then ran to
Dad's stepping for real, I ain't gonna lie.
Passed away.
No.
About 5 minutes later, the police arrived, and they arrested him. It turns out that it was not only that man, but also his other 2 friends who conspired this. Their plan was to break into our house, kidnap me, and rape me. Fortunately, they were caught and sentenced to 16 years in prison for multiple charges. Until now, I still live with.
No, you could arrest somebody who got shot. Yes, you can. They sent him to the hospital though. They arrest him and then they probably just send him to the hospital. But they handcuff him. I know that. They got to.
The fear of being alone. And I feel sorry for Molly. I really miss her. I miss her so much.
Yeah.
We know you're hovering.
W Molly though. R.I.P. Molly. She was a real one. Alright, we gonna watch these ones. I ain't watched them yet. I just had to go over to make sure they wasn't no TOS. So.
When I was 6 years old, I went shopping for clothes with my dad. I had a good time with them, and everything was fine until...
Are you gonna detain them with bullet holes? I thought that's how you do it though. I thought you detain them even though they get like shot, and then you send them to the EMS.
I noticed that a man was staring at me. He was a tall, white, and kind of weird-looking dude who was probably around in his 30s. Then he started smiling at me more creepily. My head kept saying, "What's wrong with that man?" I told my dad right away, but he reassured me that it wasn't a big deal. So I shrugged it off and soon forgot about him. A few minutes later, we were at the checkout area, and I heard the voice of someone whispering. Psst.
You saw
I
that
turned my
too?
head back and I saw the same man that I'd seen before. He was smiling again and
Oh,
tossed
fuck
me
no.
a candy.
Don't eat it.
I usually don't accept stuff from strangers because my dad won't let me. But this time, my dad wasn't looking at me, so I took it. When we got home, I went up to my room, sat down and opened the candy wrap. However, there was a folded note instead of candy. It said, "Careful." Being a young and careless kid, I just thought it was some kind of prank.
I'm not going back 10 seconds. I saw that too.
And
I tried to
ignored it.
ignore it.
A few weeks later, it was the holidays. So my mom went to a party and my dad was busy with work. I had to stay home alone.
For real.
But that
Timothy
also
gone.
meant I could do whatever I wanted to. So I was watching YouTube, eating my snacks until about 9 p.m. I started to feel tired watching YouTube, and then I heard some noises outside. I got scared. So I took my phone and ran to my parents' room, as it was the safest room in my house. I quickly locked the door. My parents' room had a monitor where I could check the security cameras, so I tried to look who was outside. However, I could only see red on the screen. I thought
Call
it
the
was
police,
strange,
bro.
so I quickly rewound for about 5 minutes. And what I saw was shocking. It was that man who I'd seen at the shopping mall. He was just standing there, holding a can of spray paint for a minute or so. And then he suddenly started spraying all the cameras. Just then, I heard small knocking noises. Hiding in my parents' closet, I tried to call my parents, but no one answered. Then I called the police, thinking that it might be my last chance, and explained to them my current situation completely. Fortunately, the police arrived in just 5 minutes. They searched our whole house, and they finally found him hiding in the attic.
Oh, shit.
After they arrested and investigated him, it turned out that the man had trailed me that day when I got the candy from him. He already knew where I lived, so he made a plan to steal some valuables from our house.
Timothy saved. Okay, he
They
went.
also found
He
apparent
lived.
evidence that he was even going to try to do some bad things to me. Well, I'm just glad I survived. However, to this day, it's agonizing just recalling the moment when I saw his face through the camera.
See, these stories don't scare me. I need a ghost story.
When I was 6 years old, I went shopping for clothes with My name is Alan, and this happened a year ago. I was at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport and about to check in, going to Dubai. I was standing in the line to check in when I noticed that someone was staring at me. It was a girl. She seemed like an ordinary girl at first, but then I noticed that her eyes were odd. They were open, very wide. She was smiling at me, but her smile was kind of annoying and crooked. I got creeped out, so after I was finished checking in, I quickly went through immigration and headed to the flight gates. Before going to the gates, I stopped at the restroom, and while I was urinating there, I could hear someone faintly whispering outside. I could tell that it was a girl's voice. When I finally walked outside, I encountered the same girl who I had met at the check-in line. She was just standing there. But then, I saw scissors in her pocket. I quickly pushed her, ran away, and hid from her for a while. 30 minutes later, I barely arrived at the gate. And guess who arrived at the gate? Right, The same girl was there again. She was literally stalking me the whole time. Right then, I was terrified. So when we started boarding, I made sure that I didn't make eye contact with her at all. Fortunately, my seat was apart from hers. So at least I felt a little relieved during the flight. But this story didn't end there. When I arrived in Dubai, I quickly got out of the airport and headed to the currency exchange counter. While I was exchanging my money, I looked around several times, but there was no sign of her anywhere. I quickly grabbed my money, but the moment I turned around, my heart dropped. The same girl whom I'd met at the airport was there. She was staring at me, holding scissors. But this time, she started twitching bizarrely. Her smile became bigger and even scarier, and she was walking toward me, closer and closer. It was almost 2 a.m., and there was nobody else around in that area. I had no choice but to run, so I dashed quickly away and started searching for a taxi to get to the train station. Just then, I realized that the girl started to speed up and chase after me. Luckily, I narrowly found one taxi, and when I got in, it was a sigh of relief. When I glanced out the back window, the girl was standing there and was staring straight into my eyes. After 2 weeks, I went back to Manila. Of course, I didn't see her anymore after that night. However, the memory of that girl has been haunting me to this day. I haven't been able to forget her face.
So Acorns
that story wasn't scary. It don't get
My name is Alan, and this happened to you.
My name is Gabby, and this story is my true experience. When I was 11 years old, my family and I moved to a big house in a tiny town. Our new house was located at the highest point, which was at the end of the town. When we bought the house, the owner explained to us that his wife had just passed away due to cancer, and that the house was very precious to her, so she never wanted to sell it. Still, the owner said the house was too big and lonely for him, since all their kids were grown up and already moved to other cities. However, during the final part of the deal, he suddenly changed his mind and didn't want to sell the house. But it was too late. The owner stormed out of the office saying that it was his house and that we were going to regret it. Anyway, this was during the time my dad was sent overseas because he was in the military. So my mom, my older brother, and I had to live by ourselves for 6 months.
Oh no, bro.
During that
It's gonna
time,
be a ghost or
we had
something.
really weird experiences. Sometimes we would wake up to the sound of a goat in our backyard. It would last the whole night. The next morning, we talked to the neighbors and asked if one of them had goats, but none of them did. So at first, we just decided to ignore the issue and leave it alone. Now, just for your information, our house design was kind of odd. Downstairs, we had my room, my brother's room, my soon-to-be-born sister's room, and a weird wide walkway that led to the backyard. And upstairs, we had a kitchen, living room, and my parents' room. The downstairs was underground, and the upstairs was technically the first floor. Anyway, one night, I decided to sleep with my mom, so I went upstairs with my brother. Later that night, we heard a sharp scream coming from downstairs. It sounded like it was my dad's voice screaming for help. He was calling all of our names. My mom rushed out of the room and was ready to run downstairs. All of a sudden, she stopped at the top of the staircase and looked at us with a weird expression on her face. "But your dad is still in Colombia. How could he..." And the next thing was my mom abruptly falling down the stairs. That moment was so horrible. It was like someone pushed her backwards before
they don't want her in that
able to
house.
resist. My brother called the police and I ran down the stairs to check my mom and see if she was okay. We struggled to bring her up the stairs, but we managed to make it to her room. When the police and ambulance arrived, they took my mom to a hospital and left 2 officers with us that night. I was crying the entire night, and we were so afraid. Due to falling down the stairs, Mom was injured, and unfortunately, we lost our new family member. The most chilling part was that they found large handprints on my mom's back, as if she was pushed by someone. This led to an investigation, but they had to leave the case open because no one was found in our house, other than the 3 of us. We all suffered and went through a hard time.
It's that house, bro. How did y'all not know that?
She slid into depression. When she recovered, we moved the following year. However, more things happened throughout the year, but not as bad as the previous one. Just footsteps, broken plates, or similar stuff to that. We put that house on the market when we left, but no one has contacted us. One thing is for certain. I hope that we never have to go back to that creepy house again. I really, really don't want to go back.
Chipotle's carne asada is back.
Oh, no. Play a game. I'm gonna after I finish watching the rest of these scary stories, I'm gonna end this stream so I can save it for later, and then I'm gonna start up a new one so I can start playing some games. No what?
I'm someone who goes on the deep and dark web constantly. It's not what people think, where it's evil and overpopulated with crazy people. That's only a small percentage of the dark web. Years ago, my girlfriend broke up with me, and I put her personal information on a forum.
Ooh,
and soon after that, she disappeared. It's been a while since...
You saw this? You saw this one? This one look like it's gonna be good.
That happened. And I've ran into people that have disrespected me since. I'm not an intimidating guy, nor do I look intimidating, nor do I ever have physical or verbal conflicts. I always think to myself that these people don't know what could happen to them. I work at a fast food restaurant, and at the time of this story, my manager was really on my case about everything. I would be late, mess up orders, have an attitude with customers, and some other stuff I could name, but it's so much. I understood that I was messing up, but the tone that this guy would talk to me embarrassed me in front of my coworkers, and sometimes in front of customers. One day, though, that was the last straw. So one day I walked into work, 5 minutes before I was due to clock in, and my manager out loud said that the window liquor is finally on time, in front of customers and my coworkers. Everyone laughed at me. During my whole shift that night, he would direct smart comments toward me, while still yelling at me for everything that I did wrong. I made up my mind. I was going to find that forum and give his information. On my walk home, I was going back and forth with myself about whether to do it or not.
Oh God,
by the time I made it home, I made up my mind. I didn't shower, nor did I change clothes. I went straight to my laptop and I searched. I possibly clicked maybe 100 links, because on the dark web there are links that will take you down any rabbit hole. A link named Pork Chop piqued my interest. When I clicked it, I was directed to an About page. It only said 6 words. We find it, we chop it. And another link that said, here's an example of what we do. I clicked it, of course. As soon as I clicked on it, the picture went to the point of view from an old school camera, with the date and time in the corner of the screen. The person behind the camera approached the man and followed him. A few minutes go by, and the man noticed what was happening. He turned around and approached the camera while yelling and screaming at the person for following him. Then all of a sudden, you see 5 huge guys dressed in black wearing a pig mask run from behind the man and drag him into the dark.
See, this is when I don't do that dark web shit.
The person holding the camera turns the camera to his or her face and leaves it there for about 5 to 10 minutes. That person also wore a pig mask, but all you could hear was the man screaming and sounds that I don't want to describe in the background. The camera was then turned back around and the sight that I saw was disturbing. It was something that no one would ever want to see. Some people say that they wouldn't wish it on their worst enemy, but I did.
Oh, shit.
After the video was over,
He
there
about
were
to DM
links.
somebody.
One said pork and the other said chop. I clicked on the pork and it prompted me to put in a code. I didn't have one, so I backed out. So I clicked on chop. There was information that needed to be filled out, like name, height, description, and place. I filled out all the info for my manager. In the place, it was my job. I submitted the form. At the end of the screen, it said, "See you soon." 4 days later, while at work, my manager approached me and decided to apologize for the way
See, it's always those fucking stories, like when people do stuff or whatever, and then that's when somebody like act like a bitch to them, and they come back and they apologize.
treated me, and offered to give me more hours and said that he will work with me more often because he sees potential in me. A few hours later,
And then you feel
it was
bad
close
for
to
what
the
you
end of
did
the
to
night.
him.
My manager helped me with the trash and took it out for me.
I feel so
As I
guilty,
was
bro.
putting chairs on top of the table getting ready to mop, I looked outside and saw my manager looking over at something, but he looked worried. I moved to get a better look and I saw what he was looking at. He was surrounded by 6 people in a pig mask with weapons in their hands. I ran outside as they swarmed him, except for one person. He had a camera. I forgot all about these guys, and then I put his information on the website. I ran outside as they approached him. He looked at me for help, but I ran back inside and called the police. It took them 10 minutes to get there. When I looked back outside,
Dude was already dead.
What I saw was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. I wish I can get the image out of my head. Between the time of me initially seeing them, calling the cops, and running back outside, these guys were gone, but my manager was still there. I went to his funeral the next week. The next day I received an anonymous email that had the whole video. They were watching him this whole time he was on shift. I don't know how they got my email. I never provided any of my information. Till this day, I still feel sick because my manager was starting to be nice to me that day. I can't go back on the dark web.
Okay, that was like one of the best stories that I watched all today. Except for that maid story. Y'all should have watched this maid story. This shit was crazy. Yo. Why am I hearing shit downstairs? I think I'm home alone and I'm hearing shit. I just heard some thumping downstairs. There's some thumping. You see? After I finish watching up these videos, I got you. I just heard, I swear I just heard some thumping downstairs and said, thump, thump. Oh.
After last month's massive solar flare added a 25th hour to the day, businesses are wondering what should...
For this story, my name will be Charlie. Years ago.
No, for... I'll call right now. I'll call right now. He said it's the pig people. I'll call right now. And I got a big bat. It's not going to save me, but I could jump out the window and run. I'm smart.
My first
I'm not
year
getting
of
caught
college,
by
I
no
lived in a
pigs.
dorm. But if only y'all knew.
Search up Mr. Nightmare. His storytelling is amazing. I'm answering. Don't hang up. That'd be so sad, bro. If like I call a 911 operator and they just hang up on me. I'm gonna search up Mr. Nightmare right after the story.
I earned a scholarship to college for baseball, and all the players lived in one dorm. Being that I was a freshman, they roomed me with a senior so he could show me what right looks like. He was a pretty tough guy who no one would mess with, so I felt like I was in good hands. It was the winter, and by that time of the school year, I was pretty set in my ways and comfortable. I was invited to a house party that one of the sororities were throwing, so I went with a few friends. When we got there, it was like any other party. People were outside, and some were inside having fun. While inside, there was music playing, along with people playing video games in one room, and it looked like a board game going on in the other. That was upstairs. After a while, I went upstairs to see why anyone would be playing a board game at a party. When I got to the room, I noticed that it was the most quiet room in the house, which was odd to me. When I walked in the room, there were 4 girls and a guy sitting at a table.
Fuck no.
I asked
That's
what
when
was
it's my
going
time
on,
to go.
and they said they were using the Ouija board. I thought it sounded interesting, so I joined. But I never really believed in that type of stuff. While we were messing with the board, it said that there was a girl in the room. But I think that one of the other people that were playing moved it, so I left. That's when unexplainable stuff would happen to me in my dorm. I'd hear laughing in our hallways at odd times of the night, knocks on the window, and I started to have bad dreams. I told my roommate, but he told me it was stress from our upcoming midterms. That went on for about 2 weeks.
Did you just say you would play immediately? Are you dumb? I would play immediately. What? Yo, what did you just say? Yo. You're dumb. Yeah.
Then one night, everything changed for both of us.
Once you do it, you can't take it back. I wouldn't touch it. Exactly, bro. I would not touch one of those. Actually, when I was like 9, I seen this movie of it, and I wanted to play it because I didn't have no idea what it was. So I asked my mom, because she'd take me to the store to go buy one, and she cursed me out because I didn't know what it was. I wanted to play one, though, when I was little. I never knew what it was, though, but she stopped me because I was going to actually buy one, or I was going to have my uncle go take me. But she stopped me. I had plans to play it that night with my cousins and all of us. But once I told her to go take us to the store, yeah, she got mad.
I remember it being a Thursday night when this happened. I was asleep in the middle of the night, and all I heard was, Charlie, wake up. I remember making noises and being half asleep, but I acknowledged him. Then he said something that woke me up immediately.
Charlie, what the fuck is that in the corner?
Oh, I'm scared.
I looked in the corner of the room, and I swear there was a silhouette of a girl. I was so afraid that I jumped off the top bunk, and I told my roommate to get up and run, but he was so petrified. He was under his covers quivering. Then she spoke.
Why do you seem so scared? All I wanted to do was play with you.
I told him I'm out, and we both ran out of our room. He was yelling as she's talking. After that, we were both so shaken that we never went back to that room. We called the police, but when they came, they never found any girl. I don't know if it was because of the house party, Ouija board game, or coincidence, but that was a moment that I'll never forget. To this day, I still hear odd noises throughout the night wherever I go.
It's everything you wished for. Your sight.
Oh, shit. That's so scary. Okay, that story was actually scary. Alright, who did you tell me to look up? Who was it? Who you told me to look up? You said Mr. Nightmare? Bro, I want to look at a video though. I don't want to just look at a pic, like an image. I need to see like an animation or something like that. This one. This one right here. A Christmas story right here. 4 real Christmas stories. This one? Or no? Yeah, and this nigga way bigger than the other dude that I usually watch, so he gotta be good. Alright, bro.
I'm a single mother of my 8-year-old boy Mark. When this happened, he was 5 and I was 27. I have my own house that was passed down to me from my grandparents. It's in the quiet side of town with a lot of older people, and I still live here with Mark today. It was Christmas time, and I was out with Mark shopping. I was doing my Christmas shopping for my family. Mark and I went to the mall, including a few clothing stores and a hardware store where I bought a gift for my dad. After all the shopping was done, I took Mark to McDonald's to get him some burgers and ice cream. Afterwards, we left the mall through the south exit, and here we bumped into a mall Santa standing outside. He waved at us
Right.
and said the usual
This shit might be ass, bro. I
Santa
don't
stuff.
know.
He then knelt down to get to Mark's level and asked him what he wanted for Christmas. Mark led my hand closer to the Santa, and I allowed it because he seemed like a normal, nice mall Santa.
For real.
Mark said he wanted a Nintendo Switch, which ironically was what I was planning on buying him for Christmas. The Santa laughed and said, "If you're good, maybe you'll get it," while looking up at me and winking. I smiled, and then he stood up and started complimenting me, saying to Mark, "Your mother's a looker, Mark, you know that?" And Mark laughed, even though he didn't know what that meant. I still smiled. Then we had a couple minutes worth of seemingly friendly adult conversation about the holiday mayhem and such.
The story seems cool, but I need to watch some animations. That's what I'm saying, bro. Like, I need to watch something, like, moving, not just sit here, right? CJ, a different day, I promise you, a different day, I'll turn this on. I promise you. Or actually, I'm going to listen to one story. Let me see.
The guy said he worked for the mall. I regrettably mentioned the stress of being a single mom during Christmas is unfathomable. And then I made a joke about needing Santa's help. Then the Santa made what I thought was an innocent joke, saying, "Mark, have you ever heard the song, 'I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus'?" And Mark shook his head yes. Then he leaned in towards me with his cheek, implying he wanted me to kiss his cheek. I was going to give him an innocent little peck on the fake beard, but as I leaned in, he turned his head and tried doing that old trick where he kisses you on the lips instead. I moved my face away in time. The way he did it was so creepy and aggressive, too. He looked at me and started doing the Santa kind of laugh, but there was nothing jolly about it. I said, "Come on, Mark," and we started walking away. He yelled "Merry Christmas," and that was the last thing I heard him say. As we drove away past the back exit of the mall, I noticed he wasn't there in front of the entrance anymore. I wish I took that into consideration as to what may have happened next. We got home, and after bringing everything inside, I locked the door, and Mark and I started to watch a Christmas movie. Our wholesome time together was then interrupted. My doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late for any kind of door-to-door people. I told Mark to keep watching as I went to go answer the door. I said, "Who is it?" through the door, and a man's voice on the other side said, "It's Santa." My heart dropped.
Oh, hell no. Santa would have got his ass popped. Santa would have got popped. Santa would have most definitely got popped.
Or I'm calling the cops.
I didn't skip nothing.
He replied, "You dropped something out of your bag, miss. I'm just looking to return it." I replied, "What did I drop?" He replied, "I don't know, miss. I'm not looking to be nosy, but if you open the door, I can hand it to you." I repeated myself that I wanted him to leave now. I then decided to call the mall management office of the mall to report this. But the man on the phone said they don't officially hire any mall Santas at this mall, and that whoever's dressing as Santa is doing it on their own accord. With that bit of information, I felt incredibly unsafe. I went back to be with Mark, but my mind was elsewhere now. I felt this sickly, worried feeling in my gut. I made an excuse to get up again after a few minutes. I went to the kitchen out of earshot of the TV. I raised the blinds to the kitchen window. I couldn't see anything out there, being that the kitchen light was on and it was pitch black outside. But I heard a man yelling, "Ho, ho, ho." He was probably out there watching me at that very moment, looking out the window. I had no choice but to call the police and report that I was followed by a man dressed as Santa. I told Mark to keep watching the movie, and I spoke to the police outside. They took a report and were on their way. The police having come made me feel just a little better. A few nights later, though, my doorbell rang again, around the same time, if not a little later. Mark was already asleep tonight. I was in the living room watching a show. I turned off the TV and went upstairs to my room, which is connected to Mark's room. The doorbell didn't ring again, but I never went back downstairs that night. It wasn't until the next day when I was leaving the house that I found the note taped to my front door. It was typed out and printed. This is a picture of the note, and it said, "I'll just be blunt. I'm sure you can guess who this is. I didn't mean to scare you the other night. I just had a long shift, and when a pretty lady talks to you after pretending to be Santa for 6 hours, hormones kind of go crazy. You and your son are the cutest things ever, and I'd love to one day be a part of your family. You can't pretend you didn't feel the connection when we spoke the other night. I already know where you live. Now I just need your number. Feel free to shoot me a text whenever, and maybe we can plan something one day. Sorry, I know this may seem creepy or a bit much, but I'm the kind of guy where if I see something I like, I go after it. Anyway, happy holidays if we don't speak soon. Here's my number. Best Ted.
Nah.
I wanted to crumple this up.
Ted would have made me
I took
cry.
a picture of it, called the police again, and gave this to them. Since it had his number on it, the police could work with that. They said I'd be hearing from someone when action was taken. And that following Monday, I got a call from, I assume, a detective telling me that the man would not be contacting me anymore, and if he did, to let him know. I never heard from that creep again. I assume the police threatened to arrest him if there was any further contact.
See, story was ass, bro. Story's ass. Nope. His other stories might be good, but that one was not good, bro. It was not good. I really need to get YouTube Premium.
This happened in the middle of last year. At that time, I was at home with my boyfriend Dan watching TV. Dan was deeply concentrated on what the TV screen was showing, so I was about to start making a romantic atmosphere. But then I heard a knock at the door. I got pretty pissed off as it interrupted, but got up anyway and opened the door. We lived with one of our friends, so at the moment, I thought it would be my friend. But to my surprise, it was a man around the same age as me. He looked a little bit tired and was forcing a smile on his face. He was all sweating, and his eyes were red as if from crying. But it wasn't my business to ask.
Damn, bro, what's wrong, bro?
Hello, the stranger said with a wide smile, taking his hand out for me to shake. Hi, I said, looking at his hand and back at him. Can I use your bathroom, please? He asked, still having this huge smile plastered on his face. Before I could say anything, though, Dan came behind me and told the guy that, indeed, he could use the bathroom.
No.
The man went in there, and Dan and I just went back to the couch and waited for him. Then I heard some sounds, like water pouring in the bathtub. After 10 minutes, I slowly started to get curious, as he didn't come out yet. I told Dan that I should check on him, but he told me to wait a little bit more. So I just waited, and 20 minutes later, he didn't come out.
What the
There was
fuck?
just silence in the bathroom. After 30 minutes, well, Dan decided that he'd check the bathroom. However, having a bad feeling, I went along with him just to be sure that nothing happened to him. Hey, is everything all right? I knocked at the door at the bathroom, but there was no response. I repeated the actions, but this time I knocked louder and yelled. Dan told me to wait a little longer, but I refused. I pressed on the handle of the door, expecting it to be locked, but to my surprise, it wasn't. I couldn't believe what I saw in front of me. To my horror, there was blood splattered on the floor everywhere, and the bathtub was filled up with a red liquid, as well with a lifeless body in it.
Damn.
The smell of blood filled the bathroom, and I wondered how I couldn't smell that outside. I told Dan to call 911 while I went over to the body to check his pulse. But when I got closer to it, I noticed that a razor blade was shoved deep in his neck. He was just dead. After half an hour, the 911 arrived with the cops. They took his body and we had to give our report to the cops. To this day, I became more paranoid about a stranger. Especially,
Y'all should never let him in the first place.
Use your bathroom is not safe and just nonsense. So don't let the stranger come in, ever.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com.
This happened in the This happened around the year 2011 when I was 13. One day my friend was planning on throwing a party at his place, so my older cousin
What y'all rate that story?
drove me there. It took about 4 hours to get there, and when I finally arrived, it was around 8 p.m.
9.
A few hours later, we were having fun, but out of nowhere, I had to use the bathroom really badly. About 5 minutes had passed, and while I was in the bathroom, I heard a crunching noise coming from the woods. At first, I thought it was someone who arrived late to the party. But all of a sudden, I heard loud banging on the glass.
At a party is crazy.
I started to think it might be my friend just looking for me. So I told him that I was inside the bathroom. However, it wasn't my friend.
Fuck.
It was a guy who looked like he was in his late 50s. He said that his car broke down. He then asked me to help him, but I was already paranoid about strangers. So I simply told him that I couldn't help him. He nodded his head and walked away. When I was done using the bathroom, I went back to the
This nigga not gonna wipe, bro?
room where my friend was. I told him what I saw and what the man said to me. My friend looked like he just saw a ghost. Then he finally said that for almost 2 months, this man was stalking his entire family and also saw him from the bathroom window tons of times. They asked the police to check their area several times, but they couldn't help his family. When he said that, I thought he was overreacting until I heard the same banging noise now coming from the door.
Oh, shit.
It was more violent now. Everybody paused what they were doing and looked at the door in shock. One guest broke the silence and said it was probably only the pizza delivery man. But my friend told me not to answer the door at all costs. I looked through the peephole, and there he was. The same guy I saw through the bathroom's window. He had a psychotic-looking face.
What the fuck?
And was licking his lips nonstop. We all just stood there in silence and hoped that the man would go
Right,
away.
that's what I'm saying. It's like 100 niggas in there. Y'all could all jump him, bro. There's no way y'all scared. Open up that door and jump that nigga, bro. What?
But after a few minutes,
and then call the police.
The loud noise came from the basement. The guy threw a brick at the basement's window and crawled through it. Suddenly, it sounded as if a gunshot echoed through the entire house. My friend and most of the partygoers screamed and ran out of the house. I stayed behind along with a few others. One of the older kids was trained in martial arts.
Oh yeah, come
so
on.
I saw him assault and attack the man until
Bitch.
he was shot.
Oh!
Afterward, the man escaped and ran into the woods. The whole scene was chaotic now.
Damn.
An ambulance and police car arrived soon after, and
Trying to be a fucking superhero, bro.
The kid that was
Damn.
shot survived. After a few days of intense investigation, the police went to my friend's house and told him that they caught the guy.
Oh, they got him.
It turns out.
Right, gon' kick the gun out of his hand. What do you like exactly, bro? Why are you running up to somebody with a gun?
Out that he was living in the woods. He also kidnapped 3 kids, but luckily they were found in time and set free. But they also found out that he had already killed a few kids already.
Oh, shit.
So after that, he was condemned to death for murder. First of all,
I would have ran before he shot.
I'm extremely worried
I would have
about
left
my
that
mom.
house, bro.
This year has been a turbulent one for the family, and I think her fragile psyche might just break. It began after my brother's death. Initially, my mom, dad, and I came together, and the family was stronger than ever. But as time went on, life got busy and the divide ensued. Mom craved constant emotional support, but it became overwhelming. And Dad was always tired from work, and he was still grieving at the loss of his son, so it became too much to handle. After that, Mom began cutting herself and threatening her own suicide as a last-ditch effort to win my father's love and affection. But it was futile. With the signing of a few papers, a 20-year marriage evaporated. Mom went into a complete tailspin after their divorce. She stopped cooking, stopped cleaning, stopped bathing, and stopped talking. Everything was stopped. We lived in a house of silence until the nighttime when I could hear her howls of heartbreak echo through the home. I loved my mom, but I knew it wasn't healthy for me to stay in this situation. In the morning, I told her I wanted to go live with Dad, at least until she pulled herself together. For the first time in weeks, she spoke to me calmly. She told me that if I leave, she'll have nothing left to live for and kill herself. She was self-possessed, but her eyes were glancing. Mom, you need help, and Well, let's talk about it again when I get home, I told her. But she didn't reply at that time. I felt uncomfortable and sorry for her. When I arrived home from college, an eerie feeling crept over me. The entire house was pitch black, and my mom was nowhere in sight.
I don't like this, bro.
I investigated the downstairs but found nothing. I checked her bedroom upstairs as well as the bathroom, but they were clear. I walked down the hallway to my room and saw a dimly lit candle on my desk.
No,
it was illuminating a note. I began reading and a chill ran up my spine after the first few words. This wasn't a note. It was a suicide letter. While reading continuously, my chest was pounding and I began to sweat.
The fuck you scared
my
me,
heart
doggy?
sank deeper and tears flooded my eyes. That is until I reached the bottom of the letter. When I reached the final two words, I became frozen with fear, and the letter slipped from my moist grip. The final two words were simply a first and last name. It was my name. Suddenly, I felt the cold breeze from my door slamming shut behind me. The candle went out, the room went dark, and I could see her grin.
What the fuck?
That was the last.
That was her spirit, I think, after that. Her ghost, whatever it was.
This happened around the year
To me recently. I was on my way home from the bed
she
when
wouldn't do
someone
that.
suddenly called. When I looked back, I could see a man in his late 40s on the road. And he had pretty long, shaggy hair that almost reached his shoulders. Besides that, there were so many small scars on his face, which made me feel really uncomfortable. I asked him if he needed any help, and he asked me for some food because he had a 5-year-old girl who was starving. However, it was somehow odd. The way he spoke didn't sound pitiful to me at all. And he was saying it quickly, as if he had memorized the lines. I stared blankly at him for a minute, and then felt anxious. I'm sorry. I have to go now. I left abruptly. Hey, hey! He kept calling from behind me, and then started yelling at me because I didn't turn my head around. I was so scared that I eventually passed my house and ran straight into another alleyway. Because it was especially hot that day, my town was pretty quiet, and that only made things scarier. Now that I think about it, this situation was really creepy. I don't even know where he came from. I didn't hear any footsteps, but when I looked back, the man walked right in front of me, asking for food again. This incident happened in my neighborhood maybe 10 years ago. There was a doctor in my town. He was married, but this guy had an affair with a minor he met online. Anyway, he went into the motel with a girl one day, like he apparently usually did. But the girl who was in the bathroom washing up didn't come out of the bathroom. When he finally went inside, he found out that the girl accidentally slipped on the wet floor and died because of a concussion.
Oh,
But he couldn't call 911 because he was embarrassed. He had to keep his social status, and he had a wife and family, you know. So he began to do something terrible and unbelievable. He dismembered her body and cut her into bite-sized...
See, before he would have just got in trouble a little bit, but now he definitely gonna get in trouble.
To reduce her volume. He then began to eat her guts and flesh.
What the
He cleaned up the bathroom and left the motel with the rest of the corpse stuffed inside his suitcase. He knew he had committed a serious crime. After he left, 2 male staff members started a conversation. The chick yesterday was hot, man. It's a good thing the room she stayed in only has hidden cameras in the bathroom. We can watch that at least. One of my friends got married not too long ago. She was living with her husband and mother-in-law, who was the type to nag a lot to her. For your information, my friend used to be a little chubby, and because of it, her mother-in-law scolded her frequently and prevented her from eating food. It was ridiculous. When I heard that, I met her at a cafe and I could see that she didn't look well. So I asked her what happened, and then she said something really creepy. My friend couldn't hold back her hunger after midnight.
Bro, they found out that was crazy,
So
bro.
she snuck into the kitchen quietly. When she heard her mother-in-law snoring in her sleep, she started eating some of the food in the refrigerator. Suddenly, she felt something was wrong. She felt like someone was watching her, so she turned around and her mother-in-law was staring at my friend. Her eyes were raised while she made a snoring sound with her mouth on purpose.
Like a zombie from Walking Dead.
I'm a man in my mid-20s. Something unbelievable
to me recently.
True horror story. Oh shit. Okay, this is a true one.
This happened to me when I was 17 years old. I live in Canada, and this situation took place during a snowstorm at around 9 p.m. It was extremely dark outside, and I was waiting inside a bus stop shelter after my part-time job to get home. Although I live in a crowded city in Toronto, it was very quiet that night, and there were barely any cars on the road due to hazardous weather conditions. I was waiting all by myself for about 10 minutes until one man who looked like he was in his 50s entered the shelter. He had a disgusting smirk on his face, which made him a bit creepy looking, and that pretty large guy started making small talk with me. He had a creepy low voice, and he kept asking me what I was doing out in this weather and where I was going. I was feeling anxious, but there was only me and that man, so I told him I was going home after work. He smiled and said to me that the buses are going to be delayed because of the weather and won't be coming in for a really long.
I already know that my lips are chapped. I don't like what's it called then? I don't like putting stuff on my lips.
Time. I took out my phone to check the bus times. However, due to the deadly cold weather, my phone died completely. Then he came closer.
That's why I can't kiss no one. I'm a very big kisser. What are you talking about? Oh shit.
To me, he smelled awfully disgusting. Hey, you wanna come with me for 5 minutes? He said. I said, I'm sorry, sir. What do you mean? He said, let's go hang out for a bit. Don't worry, you won't
I don't like using Carmex. I'm not putting no Carmex on my lips.
miss your bus. I will bring you back safely. Come on. I wasn't stupid and was aware of pedophiles, so I stepped back and refused. But he kept insisting that I should go with him. I was so afraid that he would do something bad to me. However, luckily, one lady came into the shelter, and the man immediately closed his mouth. After waiting for some time, the bus finally arrived. It was me, the lady, that creepy man, and 2 other people on the bus. He sat all the way at the back of the bus where he could watch me clearly, and I noticed that he kept staring and staring. I was so nervous, and when it was my stop, I got off along with the lady, and as I kept walking, I saw that the man got off with us and was right behind me. I freaked out and thought there was no choice at all, so I grabbed the lady's arm and asked her if she could walk me home because a man was following me. She also noticed that the guy was acting strangely, so she whispered that she would take me home. I walked with the lady, and when I looked back, he stared at me for a while and disappeared. When I arrived home, my parents and I thanked that lady repeatedly.
Oh, I feel bad for the lady. Don't let the lady
And
leave by
after that,
herself.
I never saw him again in my life.
Oh, I thought something
The
bad
black
happened.
land grant colleges.
Yeah, W woman. Don't go to school in the
21
middle
to
of the night.
24
Okay.
and interested in free college? Say no mo to FOMO. For
About 5 years ago, my friends and I were at the school, and we were joking about sneaking onto the roof after we noticed a ladder that was leading up to it. We all kept daring each other to do it, but no one actually said yes. Then someone dared me, so I said, sure, I'll do that. Meet me here tonight at 10 p.m. Everyone seemed surprised, but in reality, I was hoping that the ladder would be gone by that night so I wouldn't have to do it. I didn't want to do that, actually. After that night, it was about 9:45 p.m., and then I snuck out my window and headed over to the school again. I crossed my fingers that the ladder wouldn't be there, but unfortunately, once I got there, all but one of my friends was already waiting, and the ladder was still there. One of my friends snickered and told me, "You have to stay there for at least 5 minutes as well." I then sighed and said, "Fine." I really didn't want to get caught and suspended, so I walked over slowly, hoping that something would happen to us. However, the place around us was so quiet. I reached the ladder and stepped onto it. It wobbled a little bit at first because it wasn't attached to the building. So I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, then continued to climb. The higher I climbed, the more and more the ladder was unstable, which made me worried, but I made it to the top anyhow. I sat down on the roof and looked down to see my friends, but when I scanned the street, I couldn't see them at all.
Oh, they fucked up.
In confusion, I was
They
about to
leave him?
shout out to find them. Then I heard a loud bang, so I stood up and rushed to the edge of the roof. The ladder had fallen. I looked up trying to find my friends and said, "Gee, guys, this ain't funny. Where are y'all?" My
Or usually when they say this ain't funny, they
voice
probably
echoed through the dark
gone.
in an empty street. The night was cold and I was getting really worried. The school wasn't that tall, but it was still a long way from the roof to the ground. I scanned the street one last time, hoping they would reveal themselves. Then I saw something. Those red eyes were staring at me about 100 feet from me.
Alright, this shit is fake.
I
bro.
froze. What the heck is that? Showing its teeth, the thing slowly smiled, and the streetlight suddenly went out. Everything was pitch black. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or not. Then the lights turned back on, and I could finally see that creature hiding behind another lamppost. It was close to me. Whenever the lights went out again and were turned back on, it came much closer. When it finally reached the final lamppost, I was shaking so hard. I tried to walk backward, but then accidentally stumbled, almost falling from the roof. However, I managed to stop myself. So I looked down, searching around everywhere, but the creature had disappeared. I thought maybe it's just a nightmare, but I was wrong. I could feel something was staring at me. I slowly turned my head, and there it was. That thing was standing, towering over me. The creature was at least 10 feet tall, and it had bloodshot eyes and the most evil smile I've ever seen. I tried to scream, but no noise came out. It growled at me and stepped forward. I guess I had no choice. I jumped off the roof, not realizing I was right next to the edge. When I fell off, I hit my head really hard against the ground. However, despite the pain, I jumped to my feet. I ran away from the building as fast as I could, glancing back at the roof to see if that thing was gone. Then I noticed that it was standing in front of a window in the school, still staring at me. I had to stop turning my head. I couldn't put those red eyes out of my mind during the time I was coming back home. When I finally made it back to my house, I ran inside. Of course, my parents yelled at me for being out late at night,
Nah,
But I wasn't
frames,
really
bro.
listening because I was so scared. So I just apologized and then ran up to my bed. I had to hide under my covers for the whole night, too afraid to sleep. But the most horrible thing was what happened the next day. The next morning, when I argued with my friends about the previous night, leaving me alone, they were all confused and claimed they never went there. Then, what were the messages from my friends that they were coming? And who were they that I saw yesterday? I couldn't say anything.
What the fuck? For real, gotta be them skinwalkers, bro.
I never believed in the supernatural. I wanted to, but never felt afraid of it. Years spent scaring friends and watching horror movies that even my parents refused to watch. And each time I felt nothing. Not scared, just excited. If you were to ask any of my friends, they would tell you that I was the most fearless person they knew. I would make jokes about how I could summon the devil himself and he would be afraid of me. However, that all changed pretty quickly. My teacher had just reminded our class that there was a school excursion coming up. This was a Friday afternoon. That particular week, I became very interested in
she got in her room.
communicating
Some
with the dead
posters.
and demon summoning rituals. This reminder from my teacher made me think of a clever prank I could play on my friends in order to scare them. I decided to purchase a Ouija board. I made a plan to bring it to the hotel we were all staying at in order to scare them, or at the very least, annoy them. I ended up ordering one right there, in class, before we left for the day. I found one pretty quickly, actually. An old wooden Ouija board for no more than 15 pounds. I told my friends and laughed at their reactions. Most of them were creeped out and got
Discord?
Annoyed, but in a funny sort of way. They started joking around, saying how they would throw me out of the hotel with the Ouija board if I actually did bring one. However, one of my friends looked horrified as they told me just how bad of an idea it was. I told him that I didn't actually believe in ghosts and that this wouldn't actually work. Even if it did, I couldn't care less. I'm fearless, right? Luckily, the Ouija board would arrive in the mail on Saturday. I wasn't concerned about my parents saying anything about the Ouija board. They also don't believe in this stuff and will just label it as a useless wooden board. I was so excited when I woke up on Saturday, and the Ouija board had already come in the mail. I hugged it close, excited for all the fun I was going to have messing with my friends on our trip, and ran to the kitchen. I sat at the table and I opened it carefully. Inside was the...
I would love to go to the hotel with her. What the fuck are you talking about? See what... Bro, are you...
Slightly old wooden board with its metal pointer, and, to my surprise, there was a strange instruction guide full of text. I have 2 younger sisters, and just then they both walked through the kitchen. I had told them the night before about my plans for the Ouija board and that it would arrive that day. They both weren't too fond of the Ouija board being in the house and thought my idea was going too far, especially the youngest. She made sure to let me know that she wouldn't even touch the thing. They glanced over at me to see what I was doing, and once they saw the board, their faces turned to fright and they ran out of the room.
Oh my God.
As I read through the instructions, I had a strange feeling. Something didn't feel quite right. It creeped me out just a bit. There were so many rules, so many warnings and dangers filled the pages. I shook off the feeling of unease. At the
I could get it tomorrow.
time, I didn't realize
just
how important those rules were. Immediately after reading through the guide, I decided to play with the board. When beginning the session, I did all that I was supposed to. I followed all the rules written in the guide and stayed polite and calm when asking the spirits questions. But no matter how much I tried, nothing happened. I would try, wait, and then get nothing. Again and again, and still no response. Eventually, I got bored and ended it by saying goodbye. I left the board on the counter and continued on with my day. That evening, my mom and my 2 siblings went to the cinema, leaving me home alone. I didn't care. Being alone wasn't a big deal because I wasn't scared of anything. In fact, staying at home alone was one of my favorite things at the time. I was sitting in the living room just scrolling on my phone. That was until I heard a loud crash and bang. It made me jump. Did that come from the kitchen? I went to check what had happened. I was cautious and all, but still not scared. I assumed something had fallen on the floor. I looked in the kitchen to see what had fallen over. That's when it happened. We had a plastic rubbish bin in the corner of our kitchen, and just as I came around the corner, a plastic orange juice container shot out of the rubbish bin and exploded. It left the remnants of what was still inside of it as it sat in the rubbish bin all over. Brown, dripping, rotted orange juice stains scattered everywhere. And I mean everywhere. The walls, floor, tiles, everything was covered in this gross brown liquid. I dismissed it as a coincidence. There was a reasonable explanation for this, right? Something or other about how the juice breaks down and creates gas within the container, causing it to explode. Hadn't I seen something like that on TV once? I convinced myself that had to be it. I managed to clean up most of it and decided that I would just wait for my mom to come back home to help me with the rest of it. At the time, my mom laughed about it and remarked about what powerful juice that was, but now I don't laugh about it. This was just the beginning, and what came next will haunt me forever. That night, I had such horrid nightmares. I can't begin to explain them. I remember lots of mumbled noises and blood. Lots of blood.
This girl is
Blurred
dumb, bro.
visions
She
of
did it to
violence
herself.
and then darkness. This wasn't normal. I barely experience nightmares, and when I do, they are usually something dumb or stupid. That night, I didn't sleep well, at all. But again, I didn't think too much of it. Sunday was when I began packing for the trip. I placed the Ouija board in my suitcase and left the suitcase in front of my bed so that I wouldn't forget it the next day. As I was getting ready for bed, something seemed odd. You know, how you just get that gut feeling sometimes? That something is really wrong? Again, I blew it off thinking it was just anxiety about tomorrow's big trip. But boy, was I wrong. The night was cold.
Right.
I could
Went
hear
to the hotel with friends.
the wind blowing outside my window as I drifted to sleep and slipped into the abyss of my mind. My dreams were again loud and frustrating. Just like the night before, there was blood. This time there were screams. The whole dream was foggy and unidentifiable, but it felt like something was spawning. A corruption. I woke up breathing heavily, as if I had been holding my breath. I was sweating. Not just a little bit. No, I was drenched in sweat. I was barely awake and already my skin was crawling as I stared at the ceiling, catching my breath. I closed my eyes and did my best to calm down, knowing that it was over. The nightmare was done. I lifted my head and looked around my room. It was dark and silent, apart from the fan that was always running in my room. I reached for my phone and checked the time. 2:50 a.m. That made my skin crawl again. It was almost 3 a.m., and even though I never believed in the 3 a.m. haunting hour crap, something didn't feel right. The air felt thick, and I felt like something was watching me. I sat up, and to my horror, there was something there in the dark with me. For a second, I couldn't move. I was trying to understand what I was looking at. I blinked, and there, on top of my big suitcase, sat the figure of a girl. I could see her so perfectly.
Shit.
I could see her hair and her feet. She was staring
You're a pussy. You scared.
at me. I barely had time
Hug
to
me,
process
yo.
this before I realized there was someone else in the room. Right beside her stood an outline of a tall man. He stood very still, but I knew he was there. I reacted by grabbing my blankets and throwing them over my head. I sat there under the bed covers and tried to remain completely still. My heart hurt from just how hard it was beating.
Oh,
Was
now
I
you're gonna
having
be
a heart
scared
attack?
now.
What was this feeling? It was at that moment that I realized I was feeling pure fear. The kind of fear I have never felt before in my entire life. This can't be right. I must still be in my nightmare. I began counting my fingers. There were 10. I was awake. My mind raced. I knew whatever that was not real. I have to be hallucinating or something. But how do I know for sure? I thought of grabbing my phone and using that as a light. But if those beings were real, it would be more terrifying to see their true forms under such dim light. I decided to count to 3, and on 3, I would run to the door and turn on the lights. 1, 2. I was stuck on 2. My mind hurt. Then finally, 3. I threw the blankets off my head and jumped out of the bed. As soon as my feet hit the ground, I started to run toward my light switch. I winced at the pain from my feet as the pins and needles shot through my legs. I was fully awake, but my legs were not. As I ran, even though I felt like I was going fast, what I saw will forever be ingrained in my mind. It was the eerie figure of the girl sitting perfectly still on my suitcase, with her head slightly tilted in my direction, and the tall man beside her. He just stared blankly at my bed. I made it to the lights and turned them on. Sure enough, there was nothing there. I felt
Fucking
relieved,
crazy,
but
bro.
not entirely. Whatever that was, it terrified the crap out of me. I did not sleep that night. I didn't want to wake up to those things that night or ever again. I had the lights on for the rest of the night. I tried to distract myself by doing random things around my room, but something in me told me, destroy that Ouija board. The thought echoed in my mind throughout the night. Eventually, I couldn't take it any longer. I was losing my battle to stay awake. Nothing had happened for a while. It had to be a fluke. I decided to lie down and try to relax. I shut down my phone and lay there in my bed, perfectly still. Suddenly, I began to hear the loudest cracking noises. It made me jump. I thought it was my phone since something similar had happened in the past, where my phone's screen began to crack all of a sudden. I looked up and grabbed my phone. It was fine. The noise was gone. I looked around the room. I looked at my mirror. It wasn't my mirror. I checked my window. Still nothing. However, when I replayed that sound in my mind, I realized that it sounded more like the sound you often hear in a movie when someone breaks a bone. I wasn't watching any movies. No one was. Everyone in the house was asleep, except me. That freaked me out once again.
Would you just say, saggy? Yo.
So I did not move from my bed. My whole body was shaking. I tried to watch TikTok to distract myself. I stayed like that for another hour or so. Then after gaining some kind of bravery, I decided to get back up and try to work out. Maybe that would distract me. The time was 4:30 a.m. As I was getting into comfy clothes, I heard the loudest sound of a train.
Oh my gosh, bro. Oh, she kind of looked bad.
The sound was so loud, it made my head shake. I live in the countryside where there are no trains whatsoever. That pushed me over the edge. I grabbed everything and jumped back into my bed. Although I feel pretty dumb saying this, I began to pray. I prayed hard and wished that all of this would be over. It was nearly 5 a.m. I needed to get up. I wanted to surprise my mom with a gift before going to school. It was her birthday, but I was scared out of my mind and didn't want to be alone. I had to wake up my little sister and use a lie. I told her, I need your help to decorate the living room for Mom's birthday. It worked. I felt much better being with someone, even if it was my little sister. It wasn't long before my mom woke up and came downstairs. I sang her the happy birthday song and I gave her her present. As we sat in the living room together, I couldn't hold in my fear. I told my mom what happened. I tried my best to make it sound as lighthearted as I could so that she wouldn't be scared. When I was done telling her what happened, my mom had a horrified look on her face. That further confirmed that I had a reason to be scared. I kind of laughed it off by saying something like, I haven't slept since 2:50 a.m. Guess the spirits really did want to talk with me after all. But that didn't make me feel better. My mother suggested getting rid of the board. I was way ahead of her. I got a plastic bag, put the Ouija board and all of its parts inside of it, and told her to throw it away as far as possible from us. I couldn't even bring myself to watch her walk out the door with it. I must say, though, the moment it was out of my room, I felt relief. As if a thick air that once made it hard to breathe had been cleared out. I wanted to take a shower before I left, but I got so scared at the thought of being alone in the shower, I broke down. I began crying. My mom hugged me tight and calmed me down. I eventually calmed down, but I ended up not showering. I just sat there cuddling with my mom right up to the moment I needed to leave for my school trip. The trip was fairly uneventful in comparison to the weekend before.
You
my
play one
friends
before
were
you're
surprised
done.
that I didn't bring the Ouija board. I just told them that my parents didn't want me to bring the board, and they believed me. The best part? I slept just fine on the trip. No nightmares, no weird happenings, no creepy girls in the middle of the night. I felt fine and no longer felt scared of being alone. It wasn't until I came back home that things changed. When I walked into my room, something felt off again. I couldn't put my finger on it. It was unnerving being in there. I expected to see the Ouija board like some scene from a horror movie where the haunted object just reappears as if by magic, but that never happened. I do have severe PTSD now. I can't sleep in complete darkness, so there's always a light on in my room. I'm so terrified of being in my room alone that my parents had to move my youngest sister into my bedroom to give me peace of mind. Just 2 days ago, I brought up the Ouija board to my sister, and she told me something that made me sick. She said that ever since that day, she would sometimes have strange dreams. They were always the same. She's sitting in an empty room with a giant clock in front of her, and at exactly 2:50 a.m., the tall, shadowy figure of a man and a girl sitting on the ground would suddenly appear and stare at her, as if they were looking directly into her soul.
Yo. So all because of that her dumbass wanting to do stupid shit, her sibling had to fucking go through that shit too.
I am from South Africa, and these are true stories of strange things that happened to my dad while traveling at night. 25 years ago, when my dad was 20, he and a good friend of his, Chris, were going to a funeral. They left the afternoon before the funeral and expected to arrive the next day early in the morning. It was 1 a.m., and it was Chris's turn to drive. For some reason, he decided to take a shortcut through the forest. It was so dark that they had to take their time as they drove to make sure they didn't miss a turn or hit anything that might be in the road. They came around the corner, and then my dad noticed it. Ahead of them, just at the limit of the headlights, there was a white figure walking toward the road from the forest. Chris slowed the car down, and they both looked cautiously, trying to make out what the figure was as they got closer. It was a South African woman. She was absolutely beautiful and was wearing clean, white, Xhosa bridal attire. As she reached the edge of the road, she put her arm out and made the universal sign hikers use to say they need a ride. My dad and Chris were both confused, wondering why such a beautiful woman was standing on the side of the road in the middle of the forest at 1 a.m. As the car got closer, my dad told Chris not to stop the car and keep on driving. Chris reassured him that he wouldn't be stopping.
Be right back. Hold up. Alright, I'm back.
Stopping the car. When the woman realized that the car was not stopping, she got closer to the road and leapt at the side of the car. Chris tried to swerve and sped up a bit to prevent her from reaching the car. Just then, they heard a thud on the window of the rear passenger door. My dad quickly looked back to see if maybe she had gotten hurt, but to his surprise, she was nowhere to be seen. She had completely disappeared. My dad and Chris looked at each other. Both were concerned, but weren't really sure what to think of the situation. They continued down the road in silence. That's when they smelled it, the overwhelming putrid smell of a rotting corpse. My dad, having been to a morgue before to identify a family member that had passed away, knew that smell right away. My dad considered rolling down the windows, but because of what they just saw, He decided against it.
I'm about to turn back on my
Instead, he
cam.
looked
I was
over
doing
at
something.
Chris, who looked back at him with fear in his eyes. My dad signaled Chris to get them out of there, fast. It wasn't long until they were out of the forest, and as soon as they left the tree line, the smell completely disappeared. Originally, they weren't speaking while in the forest because they didn't want to breathe the smell in their mouth. But neither of them dared speak a word until sunrise. My dad knows that woman was a ghost, but never got to know what happened to her, though, or why she was there, haunting that forest.
She probably wanted help.
It's all about standing.
I was 4 years old when this story takes place. My parents and I drove from our home in Johannesburg to the Eastern Cape to visit my grandmother on my mother's side. It usually takes us half a day to get there, so we would
Not gonna lie, I gotta finish this pancake first, bro. This shit is
often
so good.
drive through the night.
Then I'll turn
The
back on
Eastern
my
Cape
cam.
is one of the poorest provinces in South Africa, and so most people live in the mountains, in these homes called rondavels. It's mostly farms that you come across as you travel through the area. It's terribly boring as things go. Fortunately, my grandmother did not live on one of these boring farms. She lived near the capital city in a town in the mountains just outside of the capital. The city wasn't massive by any means, and there were a few things to do, but not much. Often you hear about or see people practicing witchcraft, as this was an acceptable religion in the area. My family and I are believers in Christ, so we were grateful to him for keeping us safe whenever we went there. My dad was driving through Queenstown, where witchcraft is very prevalent, and it just happened to be around 3 a.m. as we passed through. My mother and I were asleep. As he drove down the road that led out of town, he noticed a tall, skinny figure ahead of him on his side of the street. This figure was so tall and was far enough away that he couldn't see a face clearly. It was unclear even what gender.
What is that?
The being had a huge afro,
Yo!
and its skin was extremely pale. As the car, a brand new BMW X5, passed this thing, the thing started running alongside the car on his side. My dad was freaked out and decided to drive a bit faster. No matter how fast he drove, the thing kept running next to the car, and there was no way a normal human being could keep up with him as he drove like that. It kept following, so he kept speeding up, going so fast you'd think he was a Formula One racer. Still, this thing kept up with the car. Suddenly, the thing slowed down, and my dad, who was still trying to put distance between him and the thing, saw it watching the car from his rearview mirror. My dad fortunately remembered that he was quickly approaching a sharp turn and slowed down in time. This really freaked him out. If he had kept driving as fast as he was around that turn, then we surely would have crashed. That's when he realized that being was after us. It wanted us to have a car accident and die. To this day, my dad believes that thing was a zombie. I was around 6 years old when these two very strange events happened in one night.
That is not normal,
we were on our way through Eastern Cape. Around 11 p.m., I was asleep in the back seat, and my dad noticed the car was running low on petrol.
Thank you so much, bro. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Luckily, my dad spotted a garage, which is also a gas station, before we ran out. We've done this trip a number of times, but my dad insisted that he'd never seen this garage before. What was even weirder is that it was in the middle of nowhere. Standing outside of this garage was a group of 8 ladies in uniforms.
What is that?
We recognized the uniforms as church uniforms, which is a common attire in some churches in South Africa. Unlike most places, this garage didn't have employees to pump the petrol into the car for you. This struck my dad.
Those are nuns, actually. Those are actually nuns. Hi, Travis.
It's odd. He went inside.
What's up, Al?
To pay and then came back out to fill the car. As he was filling the car, he glanced in the direction of the church ladies and realized that they had moved closer to our car compared to where they were when we first pulled in. What was weird about that is that he didn't hear any footsteps prior to that. He turned back to the car for a moment, and when he glanced to see if they were still getting closer, he was face to face with one of the church ladies. She stared deep into his eyes, with her eyes wide as if she was possessed. She started loudly speaking a language he could not understand, which is very weird because my dad knows every language in South Africa. There are 11 of them. My mother saw what was happening, but she was trembling with fear in the car, uncertain of what to do, and frozen in her seat. The woman started speaking faster. While this was going on, the other ladies were getting closer and closer to the car and were starting to form a circle around the car, but they were completely silent. Suddenly, the woman who was chanting who knows what looked into the car and directly at me. I was still passed out in the back seat. My father describes the way she looked at me as evil. While the lady seemed distracted looking at me, my father quickly finished
Take
pouring
off.
petrol
Yes, go, go,
and
go,
drove
go.
off. As we pulled out of the station, my mother looked out the back window, and the ladies were gone. My dad is sure that those ladies were witches dressed as church ladies to make themselves look harmless. The second incident happened around 5 a.m. when we were just about an hour away from my grandmother's house. By this time, my dad had been driving all night and was very sleepy. He said that he closed his eyes for 1 second, and the next thing he saw was a sign saying, "Welcome to Jamestown." My father was extremely shocked by this because we had passed Jamestown 3 hours ago. What's even weirder is that we arrived to my grandmother's place 4 hours later, as if our car had somehow teleported back to Jamestown. It was on that day my father decided to change what time we left our home to go to my grandmother's. He was determined to avoid driving through that area at night ever again. This also helped my grandmother, who would call and check on us through the night, more and more frequently the closer we got, and that meant she didn't sleep all night, and instead prayed for us while we were on the road. Her phone calls really helped my dad stay awake. Sadly, my grandmother died when I was 9. She'll be terribly missed by the family. As for my dad...
I did not mean to press that button, but... Those stories was alright. They wasn't even scary for real. They alright.
This happened a while ago when I was home alone. It wasn't my first time being home alone, but what happened will terrify me if I'm ever home alone again. My parents had to go see my sick grandma, and she lived on the other side of the country, so it took at least 5 hours to get there. I wanted to go too, but I had an important exam the next day, so I stayed back. I don't have any siblings, so I had the house all to myself. My parents left at 6 in the evening. After they'd left, I just went to my room and started playing some video games. An hour or so went by, and I had to study or I wasn't going to pass the exam the next day. So I took out my notes and started going through them. I was listening to some music, so I almost couldn't hear anything. After a while, I started to get a little hungry, so I went to grab some snacks from the kitchen upstairs since my room is in the basement. I was rummaging through the fridge when I heard a knock at the door. It was kind of odd since my parents had told me we weren't expecting anyone. Quietly, I went to take a peek through the peephole. It was a girl. She looked to be around 14 or 15, and she was holding someone's hand, who I assumed was her little sister. I was so busy taking in their appearance that I didn't notice she was still knocking. Now, even louder. I asked her who she was and what she wanted without opening the door. There was no answer. Instead, she started knocking even harder. Then I heard a bang. This time, it seemed to be coming from my parents' room.
Oh shit.
I was scared at this point. I threw the pack of chips I was holding and rushed downstairs to my room and locked it. I started hearing someone's footsteps coming towards the basement. I hid under my bed, waiting for what was about to happen next. I almost started crying when I remembered that I'd left my phone on the kitchen table.
Damn, you fucked.
Suddenly, I could hear police sirens, but I was confused because I didn't get the chance to call the police. Turned out that my parents' room faced our neighbor's house.
Oh, and they saw it.
When she heard the bangs, she knew something was wrong. So she peeked through her blinds, only to see a sketchy person was trying to break into her house through my parents' bedroom window. She immediately called 911.
I thought it was a ghost. What?
The knocking on our door was a trap to distract me, so the burglars could get into our house. The burglars tried to run, but were soon caught. My parents were later called.
Yeah, W neighbor.
I'm forever thankful to my neighbor for saving my life. Hi, I'm a 16-year-old girl from Finland. I have one creepy experience that I want to share. I really don't believe in paranormal activity, but this made me think twice. When I was 7 years old, we moved into a new house that was built in the 1950s. The house was pretty huge and had 3 floors. Back then, I had just one little sister. She was about 2 at the time. One day, my parents and my sister were just chilling at home. I wasn't in there because I was with my friends. That day, something strange happened with my sister. My mom asked her what's wrong, and my sister just pointed her finger at the stairwell and said, "That girl isn't my big sister."
What the
My mother thought it was just a child's imagination and shrugged it off. But my sister kept saying other things like, "There's a little girl, who's that girl?" And she pointed her finger to the empty stairs.
You need to listen to your kids, bro.
This made my parents a little uncomfortable. A few weeks later, our family friends came to visit us. They had a 3-year-old kid. Let's call her Hannah. Hannah sat around our kitchen table. The table has a straight eye line to the stairwell. She stared at the stairs and said, "Why is there a flattened girl?" My parents and Hannah's parents saw no one there.
What?
We always keep the lights on the stairs if someone needs to go to the bathroom or something at night. Sometimes we heard footsteps from the stairs, but
For real.
weren't scared by that. We were just confused. When I was 13 years old, I was up late at night. Everyone was already asleep, but I wanted to watch YouTube and stay up.
Yeah.
Suddenly, stair lights went on and off very fast for a whole minute. I was a little scared, but I still didn't pay much attention. My other baby sister, Susan, was born in 2018. The last part of this paranormal experience happened in 2019 when my younger sister, Susan, was a year old. My parents and Susan were in the living room. Susan said to my parents, "Why is there a girl on the ceiling?" And sometimes she asked about a girl who was on the stairs and in the living room. So that was my paranormal experience. Me and my parents have no clue what my
Get out of
sisters
that
and
house,
Hannah
bro.
saw when they were little children. These days, they don't remember anything about the stairwell ghost girl. I wonder if a little girl died at our house in the past. Even today, I hear footsteps on the stairs, but I'm not scared. I hope someday the girl ghost gets where she belongs.
My name is Nathan Mendez. I am from
Yeah, I
Houston,
think they're based on
Texas,
true
and
stories.
This is a very sad
No way we
story
can
that
see
I
them
am
for
about
real.
to share. As a little kid, when I first heard the song "What I've Done,"
Well,
by
some of them based on true stories. Oh, yep, see?
Linkin Park, it was in the end credits of Transformers 1 from 2007. Thanks to Transformers, I became a Linkin Park fan even though Chester Bennington died. Or so I thought. Fast forward to 2022. On April 10th, I went to the Houston Galleria Mall. The Houston Galleria Mall is one of the biggest shopping malls in Houston, Texas. My family and I were looking for formal clothes to wear for church on Easter Sunday. When my mother was in a store called Bed Bath & Beyond, I waited outside. A few minutes
I know
went
that
by,
store. I know that store.
and a man approached me who looked and sounded exactly like Chester Bennington. He asked me if I knew where GameStop was because he had a son whose birthday had passed the month before. I pointed him in the right direction, but before I let him go about his business, I asked the man, "What is your son's name?" He answered Tyler. I asked him another question. "Are you Chester Bennington of Linkin Park?" But he didn't answer that question. He just turned and ran away. I even thought to myself, that can't be Chester Bennington because he died on July 20th of 2017. I just need to know something. Was that actually Chester Bennington, or was that his ghost?
All right, let me look it up and see if that's real. What's his name? Chester. Oh. Yo. It's an actual person. They are real. Yo. What the fuck?
It's a taste of fall.
Vacation.
This story happened in 2007, as far as I can remember. I was 11 back then, and my family and I went to Sri Lanka for our summer holidays. It was a normal vacation by visiting family there and enjoying the food. We were on a road trip with my uncle, auntie, and my cousin. we planned on visiting the temple, which was located on the southeast coast of Sri Lanka. We prayed, fed the holy cows there, and ate some really good temple food. My dad even cut his hair, as is tradition ritual when you're wishing someone the best of luck. So it was a pretty fun family day, as you say, with no complaints. It was starting to get a little dark, and by dusk, my uncle and my dad decided to look for a motel to stay for the night so we could get some rest before we had to head home the next day. They found a motel nearby the temple, but still out of the city, which was very dry as far as I can remember, and there was nothing but dry, dusty earth. Behind the building was a wheat field that led to nowhere, but the building was in good condition for its location and age. However, we got 2 rooms on the top floor on the 5th story, one for my family and the other one for my uncle and his family. Our room was pretty small, but enough for 5 people. There was 1 large bed and 1 single bed. Right in front of the large size bed was a dresser with a TV on it, and next to the large bed was the bathroom with a small window in it. After we got our rooms, I remember we went to the city for dinner and came back to the motel around 10 o'clock. My oldest sister, who was 19 back then, and my brother, who was 9, shared the large bed together, while my parents slept in the bed next to us. We fell asleep and were hoping to sleep through the night because we were all very exhausted from the heat. We knew we had to get up early the next day, so our mom told us that we must get to bed immediately. By about midnight, I can't remember exactly what time it was, but it was very dark. I heard a noise coming from the end of my bed, right in front of the dresser. Because of the moonlight faintly shining in, I could barely make it out. I saw my dad was taking something out of his wallet. I wasn't thinking much of it, but still was wondering why he had to do it at midnight. I fell back asleep and didn't think much of it. A few hours later, I was awoken again, this time by the terrifying noise and scream from my auntie's room next door. I looked to my left and saw that my parents weren't in their bed anymore. While my auntie was screaming and shouting next door, I suddenly saw my mom run back into our room, take off her wedding chain from her neck, and throw it under the bed. Now at this point you should know that a wedding chain is a wedding ring in our culture, which is a holy chain made from a lot of hard work and is extremely valuable. She went back to my auntie's room again, and I looked to my right and saw my brother and sister were also awake. I asked my sister what happened, but she didn't know what was going on and was trying to comfort us. I just know how scared and cold I was. All 3 of us started to tremble and shake with fear. After 5 minutes, my mom came in and gave us a hug. We weren't crying, but we were so incredibly scared, our hearts were beating out of our chests. I'm not sure how it is in the western parts, but we originally lived in Switzerland. However, I noticed that in places like Sri Lanka or anywhere in the southern parts of India, women tend to cry very loudly. As a child, this could be quite distressing. We weren't accustomed to such intense displays of emotion, especially when someone cried out in pain like my aunt did. Her crying made the situation even more unsettling. Yet, at that time, we didn't fully understand what was happening. After an hour, we fell back asleep.
What's
because
going
our
on,
mom
bro?
told us to. In the early morning, my parents were awake and were talking about the incident last night. My mom started to tell the horror. By night, a burglar climbed up to my uncle's room on the top floor, right next to our room, and stole a $5,000 wedding chain from my auntie, and also the car key to our van. My uncle woke up because of a noise from the bathroom, investigated, and caught the burglar trying to flee out of the window. When he tried to grab him, the burglar fell out of the window to the ground and disappeared into the wheat field. They chased him through the wheat field, but couldn't find him. The guy escaped, and even the police couldn't find him. Thankfully, we got a second key for our van, packed up everything, and went directly home. Before that, my uncle wanted to make sure that the burglar hadn't left anything behind while running away, in hopes that we might find a clue. However, despite our efforts, we couldn't find anything. My auntie was sad and barely spoke while driving home because she was so traumatized by the incident. While we were driving home, My dad made sure he had everything and looked into his wallet and realized that a small picture of his father was missing, and so was his cash. That's when I realized that the man in front of the dresser wasn't my dad at midnight. It was the burglar himself. I don't want to know what would have happened if that guy realized that I was awake and looking at him. I'm glad it was dark so he couldn't see me, but it also freaks me out when I think about that it actually was the guy who took my auntie's wedding chain and the key of our van. Ever since then, I always make sure that the restroom window and the door to my hotel room is completely locked and deadbolted.
Grab everything you need for holiday gifting. From stocking stuff.
Alright, I'm gonna watch 2 more stories. 2 more.
Drawing. It's my favorite hobby, and I love it. It always makes me feel better. Whenever I have a bad day, I just sit down and draw my frustrations out onto paper. I was riding my bike home from school when I suddenly fell off my bike and hit the ground hard. I looked up to see Finn Barker grinning at me. He walked over and picked me up by the front of my shirt with a smirk. "Hey, Zach," he says. I could smell his breath. It smells like rotten fish. "Hi there," I say, forcing a nervous smile on my face. He throws me down. "You almost ran me over with your bike," he exclaims, crossing his arms while looking down at me with a frown. I mutter an apology, but that doesn't seem to satisfy him. He grabs my bike and throws it into the street. A few seconds later, a truck passes by and runs over it.
Damn.
I gasped and stood up, looking at my now ruined bike, as Finn laughed. I ran off to my house, slamming the door shut before locking myself up in my room. I put my head down on my drawing desk. Just then, I looked up to see a pen lying on my desk. It didn't look familiar, but I took it anyway and grabbed a sheet of paper from my backpack. I began drawing a picture of a bike, already missing my old one. The pen was surprisingly smooth, and it didn't seem to smear at all, which was amazing. After a few hours, the door opens and my mom walks in. "Honey, it's 10 at night. Go to sleep. You have school tomorrow," she tells me sternly. "Okay. Mom, did you buy me this pen?" I asked, holding up the pen I had used earlier. She smiled and nodded before exiting my room. I thanked her as she walked out. Then I stood up and flopped onto my bed, quickly falling asleep. I woke up the next morning, already running late. "Damn it," I mentally cursed as I jumped out of bed and quickly got ready for school. I ran out of the house once I was ready, but suddenly stopped as I gasped in shock. There was a yellow bike standing on my front porch.
Okay, this gotta be fake.
And it looked exactly like my old bike. Remembering I'm running late, I just push my shock aside and hop on it, quickly pedaling to school. After a few minutes, I arrived and quickly made my way to class. I entered and slumped on my desk, happy I wasn't tardy. I decided to draw with my new pen
Oh
to kill
shit,
time.
it's gonna be some new shit.
Suddenly, my friend Jimmy comes up to me. "Dude, guess what I just found out this morning?" he asks me, grinning mischievously. "What?" I ask him curiously. "I found out that Finn is scared of clowns. Cool, right?
He gonna draw
we
the
can
clown.
prank him on Halloween night," he says with a smirk. I looked over at Finn, who was talking with a guy. "So, he's afraid of clowns, huh? I have an idea," I say with a smirk as I grab my new pen. I rip a sheet of paper out of my notebook and begin drawing a picture of a clown. "Here, give it to him," I told him.
Shit, if you could draw stuff and make it become real, I will keep drawing money. Money, money, money.
Jimmy nods, taking the drawing of the clown, and he ran off to Finn. He hands him the folded picture of the clown and runs back over to me. I see Finn just shove the paper in his pocket, not even bothering to check what was on it as he continued talking. "There," Jimmy says, smiling innocently. I high-five him and we both laugh. After school, Finn gets to his house, slamming the door behind him. "Hey, Dad, I'm home, old man," he yells as he closes the curtains of the living room window. It was dark outside. Finn curses and walks up to his room, throwing his backpack on the ground. He sits on his bed and turns on the TV, setting the volume very loud. He shoves his hands in his pockets and feels something. He suddenly remembers the sheet of paper Jimmy handed him in class today. He takes the folded paper out of his pocket. I swear, the kid's gonna die tomorrow if it's a stupid note, he thinks bitterly as he unfolds the paper. His eyes widen in fear as he quickly crumples the paper and throws it across the room. Suddenly, the closet door moves. He turns the volume down and looks at the door. He shakes his head. It's probably my stupid cat, he mumbles, trying to calm himself down. It happens again, and he stands up and walks over to the closet. Stupid cat! He grabs the doorknob and yanks the door open, getting ready to scold his cat. Instead, his eyes widened in fear. Standing there was a clown with tattered clothes and razor-sharp-looking teeth. Hey, buddy, what's shaking? The clown asks with a sick smile before cackling out loud like a maniac. Finn backs up and falls on his bed, frozen with fear. Get away from me! Finn yells, scared out of his wits. Oh, come on, kiddo! Want a pie? The clown asks, holding up a pie that seemed to be the bad type of red. Finn screams, curling up in his bed, as the clown closes in on him. Meanwhile, at Zach's house. And done. Voila! Zach exclaims to no one in particular as he holds up a sheet of paper, smiling triumphantly. The paper contains a drawing of a creepy clown with tattered clothing and sharp teeth hiding in Finn's closet. The drawing shows Finn curled up on his bed, an expression of pure terror frozen on his face. Man, I can't wait to see the look on Finn's face tomorrow when he sees this drawing on his desk, Zach says, putting the drawing away in his backpack. If he only knew Finn was no longer going to be a bother at school tomorrow, or for the rest of Zach's life.
Join large-scale battles with military vehicles. The online action game War Thunder has received a major up.
This story took place in Sylhet, Bangladesh, and was experienced by my uncle, who was around 20 at the time. My uncle and 4 of my other cousins went on a fishing trip, and by the time they started making their way back to the village, it was getting dark. As there is very little street lighting in the rural areas of Bangladesh, and the journey back home was a few hours' distance, they decided to set up camp and continue their journey the following day. They decided that 2 members of the group would stay awake for 3 hours each and then rotate to keep watch over the fish and equipment as well as their own safety. My uncle was in the first group to sleep, so after 3 hours, he and one of my other cousins woke up to keep watch while the others slept. The cousin who was meant to keep watch with my uncle at the time was feeling very drowsy. My uncle requested that he got some rest and he could keep watch.
Hell no, see bro,
While
no.
keeping watch, my uncle heard a sound coming from nearby bushes and trees. Assuming it was a stray animal attracted to the fish, he went with his stick and poked the bushes and the sound stopped. When he turned away, he heard the sound again and was curious as to what it was and where it was coming from. He went through the bushes and found a small clearing with a very tall tree. On further observation, my uncle noticed a figure of a woman sitting at the top of the tree.
What the fuck?
She had long, dark hair, which cascaded all the way down to the bottom of the trunk. She had pale skin and was of a thin build. My uncle, who was a quick thinker, grabbed the woman's hair, as he knew she was not a human being, but a jinn. Jinn refers to a ghost or demon commonly seen in rural Bangladesh, and he knew if he did not act fast, he and the others were not going to make it to the morning. A jinn's hair is its weak point, and if a person can grab hold of it, the jinn is powerless and cannot harm the person.
Oh yeah, that
The
nigga's
woman
smart.
instantly screamed when he grabbed her hair and started pulling away. But my uncle clenched his fist and did not let go. He knew if he did, he would regret it. The jinn begged and pleaded with him and said she would make him rich and powerful if he let her hair go. But my uncle clung on with all his strength. After a long time, the jinn gave up, and my uncle, who was really exhausted, fell asleep with his hands still clenched on the djinn's hair. He woke up in the morning and found all my cousins surrounding him, staring at him, looking very confused. When he looked up at them and asked why they were surrounding him, they pointed at his hand. He looked down and saw a dead crow in his hand, jet black, like the djinn's hair he had been holding on to all night long.
Oh shit, it's another one.
This story took place a few years ago when I was working at my old job in London, England. I was a manager there, and the company I worked for helped people gain skills and find employment. A woman came into the office, and the receptionist had her fill out the application form to complete the course. Part of the registration was made up of an initial assessment on the computer, which would determine the level the person was working at, so we could see their strength.
Thank you so much, bro. Thank you so much. God bless. Thank you so much. What's up? What's up, Jaden?
Strengths and weaknesses. The woman was sat at the computer.
I've been here for anyone. Good shit, bro. Thank you.
At a blank screen for a long time, and it was getting late. As the office was closing shortly, the receptionist asked the woman if she is happy to come back at a later date to finish the assessment. The woman did not respond and continued to stare at the blank computer screen. The receptionist then came to me and asked if I could speak to the woman and inform her that we are closing the office. I went over to her and asked if she's okay and let her know that we are closing shortly. She asked if she could speak to me privately. I accepted and took her into my office. The woman opened up and started talking to me about how her husband recently died and that he often visits her, especially at night. I thought these claims were extremely strange. I found myself just nodding and making minimal conversation as I wanted to get out of the office and enjoy the rest of my day. The woman then said something which made me freeze. She said her husband was now in the office.
Oh no.
With us. I noticed her looking over my shoulder, and I instantly felt the room get colder. I could feel sweat on my forehead, and my hand was trembling. I had never been so scared in my life. I quickly texted the receptionist under the desk and told her to come to the room and say there had been an emergency and I needed to leave. She listened, and the receptionist came to the room and told me I have an important phone call I couldn't miss, to which the woman replied, she is happy to wait for me. I told her the office is now closed and we need to leave the building as the cleaners need to come and do their job. She finally left the office, taking the coldness with her. I went to security and informed him to never let her back in if she was ever to come back, but she never did, and I never saw her again.
Oh shit. Damn. What is this story? I never watched this before. I probably had to look over it real quick though.
It had to be you.
On the 6th floor. Late at night, I took the apartment elevator bound to the first floor to buy some cigarettes. The elevator stopped on the...
I think I did watch this and I got bored of it.
There was a middle-aged man among my neighbors who had been practicing martial arts for a very long time. He practiced by striking trees in his front yard every day and would break bricks with his bare hands. But one day, he was found dead in the front yard of his house. What was even more shocking was that he had suffocated to death with his fist stuck in his throat. His jaw was completely dislocated, something that couldn't have happened without compulsion. But there were no traces of someone having done it. The whole neighborhood was in shock, and the police focused on the investigation, but there was no progress. One day, while I was taking a rest at home, I heard a voice outside. "Please, open the door." When I heard that voice, I was walking over to the door and opening it before I knew it. It felt like an order I couldn't resist. In front of the door, there was a man dressed up with eyeball-shaped earrings, necklaces, and rings, and he was staring at me with his eyes wide open. I was startled, and at the same time, a tingling sensation ran through my brain and spine. Then suddenly, I became completely exhausted and started to be in a semi-conscious condition. He then said, "Please don't stare back at my face for a long time. Roll your eyes back." Then my pupils started to go up. I was so startled that I tried to look down, but it didn't work.
What the fuck?
It seemed to be out of my will. I screamed. Then he said, "Please don't make a sound," and my voice suddenly did not come out. I was standing there with an upward glance, feeling great pain. Even though I had my pupils upwards to the extent where I couldn't roll my eyes further, he kept saying, "More. Roll your eyes more, please." Tears flowed like a waterfall as I felt tremendous pain, as if my pupils were being ripped off.
What the fuck?
I barely begged him for help in a shrill voice. He said, "Are you still able to talk? If so, bite your tongue, please." Then suddenly I was biting my tongue with my teeth. I tried to open my mouth with all my might, but it didn't work. I felt great pain. Only then did I realize how the martial artist had died. He said, "Now bite your tongue until it cuts off." Suddenly, someone shouted from behind, "Hands up!" It turned out that the police had been patrolling the neighborhood and had followed after a suspicious-looking man. The moment I heard his voice, the numbness of my body...
Yo, this dude is fucking weird. Yeah, what did you walk back into? This shit is crazy,
The man
bro.
turned around and looked at the police and said, "Please drop the gun." Then the police dropped the gun he was holding.
Punch him!
onto the floor.
Get up! The
He
one that's on the
didn't pick
floor.
up
Get up and punch him behind him and knock him
the
out.
gun and stood still with an idiotic expression on his face. At that very moment, I attacked the man from behind and put a headlock on him. But when he said, "Your arm is getting weak," he smoothly slipped away as my arm weakened, and I was perplexed. He pointed at me and said to the officer, "Point your gun at this man."
Oh, shit.
Then the police picked up the gun and pointed it at me. The man said to the police, "If he moves, the trigger will be pulled," and quietly disappeared. I couldn't move, and the police stood still for a long time, his body stiff. After the man had completely disappeared, the police dropped his gun and collapsed onto the floor, devastated. We couldn't believe what we'd been through, and since then, the police devoted all of their energy to catch the enigmatic man.
Yeah, bro.
And after a while, I heard news that the man had been caught. It turned out that the man had the ability to hypnotize people in 1 second. He had used that technique to play with people like toys. It turned out that there were hundreds of other people who had been harassed by him, but no one could report it because he had hypnotized them so that they could not report it to the police. Instead of sending him to prison, the government reportedly took him to use him for special tasks. No one knows what particular mission he is used for. But since he is such a dangerous person, whenever even high-ranking government officials meet him, they are reportedly accompanied by dozens of special forces.
Nah, that's crazy, bro.
Your run is your run. You decide the starting line, finish line, and everything in between. Wanna fly?
Trying to see if there's like any more for real. Like ones that I haven't watched.
I was a bad kid. And no, I'm not talking about your regular teenage delinquency like trying cigarettes, school detentions, or getting bad grades. I mean really bad. By age 17, I was shoplifting, stealing cars, getting picked up by cops for all sorts of things. Not exactly hurting anyone, but I was a constant headache for my mom and dad. Then after me and Dad almost got into an actual fist fight, he kicked me out of the house. I know I deserved it, and I know they figured I'd just go stay with friends for a couple of days because that's exactly what I did. But me being me, I quickly wore out my welcome at my buddies' houses and ran out of places to stay. But again, me being me, I was way too proud to just go home and apologize. Since it was summertime, I figured it'd be a good idea to head down to the park to find somewhere to sleep. Now, I lived in the inner city back then, so there was a bunch of other actual homeless people already sleeping there. And as soon as I realized I was actually stuck out there for a night, I started to realize that this homeless thing wasn't the game anymore. As it started to get really late, I got to the park at around 11 p.m., and it was like 1 a.m. by the time this happened. One of the homeless dudes walked up to me as I started to bed down on a bench and started talking to me. He asked what I was doing, and being naive, I told him, "I'm homeless." He immediately responded by saying, "No, you're not," and pretty much guessed the whole deal about me having a falling out with my mom and dad. I didn't want to admit that he was exactly right, so I just kept my mouth shut. But I remember him saying something like, "Really though, kid, if you have kin, you need to pay him a visit because I promise, you ain't ready for this life." My pride kept me out there for 3 whole nights, and every single time I curled up on that bench, the same old homeless dude would walk up and be like, "Go home, kid. This ain't you." In hindsight, he was exactly right, but at the time, he was just another person to prove wrong. My final night on the streets also happened to be the first that I tried to ingratiate myself with the homeless folk who slept in the park, partially out of boredom, partially out of hunger. I'd run out of money, run out of food, and I figured if I hung out with the other guys, I could maybe get in on some of their food or something. I asked around, but no one had any spares. Until I asked this one guy, and he told me to buzz off, and I noticed a Snickers bar sticking out of his coat pocket. My rumbling stomach basically just overrode my brain, and with all the dexterity of a Victorian pickpocket, I slid the thing out of his pocket and walked off. Not my proudest moment, stealing food from a homeless guy when I could have just swallowed my pride and walked home, but it is what it is. So I go off to hide somewhere so I can devour the Snickers whole, then I walk back to where the other guys are to hang out some more. Maybe like 2 or 3 hours later, I'm still trying to ingratiate myself with the homeless guys, but I'm also still pretty nervous around them for obvious reasons. I figured the guy I stole from is too drunk to even notice that I stole from him. But oh boy, was I wrong about that. Because like I said, a few hours after I stole it, I noticed the guy began to tap his coat pocket, obviously noticing that the candy bar is gone. I'm trying to remain inconspicuous, but I'm also trying to keep my eye on the guy because if he put 2 and 2 together and worked out that it was me that stole from him, I wanted enough warning to be able to get out of there. So the guy taps his pocket, and when he stops, I can see the cogs turning in his booze-soaked brain as I figured he was thinking, pretty sure I had some candy in there. But then a few seconds later, he's back taking pulls from his 40-ounce like he'd completely forgotten about the whole thing. Only, he hadn't. And the most shocking thing about what came next was how it went from 0 to 100 in like a second flat. So remember that pull of his 40? He takes 1, then 2, then a third much longer one, almost like he was trying to polish the whole thing off in a hurry, which as it turned out, was exactly what he was doing, because what was once an innocent beverage receptacle soon became a weapon. When he turned to the guy to his right and sent the glass 40 bottle smashing into his face. The guy just collapsed, hands covering his face, same hands with muffled blood-curdling screams that he let out. The guy I stole from then started kicking the life out of him. "Steal from me? Steal from me, mother effer?" And out of all the homeless people there, only one actually tried to break it up. And even then, it was just a slurred,
"It's a bad idea.
Hey, break it up over there," which ended up being totally ignored. I remember turning to the older dude who'd been nice to me, telling me to go home and whatnot, and I feigned ignorance as I asked him what was going on. The guy said the dude getting beat down was always stealing stuff, so if anything went missing around the park, it was most probably his fault. No one cared, though. No one gave a single worry that this guy was getting his face stomped on, and it was all my fault. Oh, and I mean stomped on. I could hear this guy's face literally crunching under the guy's boot.
Money makes the world go round. Crypto makes the world go forward.
I knew I should have said something. I know I should have owned up, but believe me when I tell you that I've never been that scared. Not before or after. All I could think of was, if I tell the truth, that'll be my face getting stamped on, only it'll probably be like 100 times worse because, well, look what I caused. I turned to the nice guy and was like, but what if he didn't steal it? What if someone else stole it? The guy looked at me and his eyes went all wide and he leaned in and said, "Don't say a word, kid. Just leave. Leave and never, ever come back." As I walked away, I could still hear the guy getting his butt beat, and although I never found out what happened to him, I don't see anyone being able to survive the kind of head injuries he got. That very same night, maybe at around 2 a.m., I walked back to my parents' house and banged on the front door until my dad woke up and answered. I just blurted out this big, long apology about being a total idiot and not appreciating what I'd had. I'm pleased to say that that was the first step on the road to being a decent human being, because almost everything I did before that had little to no consequences, or rather, what little there were didn't bother me.
It's crazy,
but that
bro.
night I stole the candy bar, I actually saw how bad the repercussions could be, and honestly, I had no idea they could ever be that bad, just for taking a candy bar. I feel equal parts shame and horror when I look back on it. My pride and greed caused me to do something shameful, and my cowardice might have cost a relatively innocent man's life. I wish it had never happened, but at the same time, if it didn't, who knows? I might be still hanging out in that park today, if I'd even be alive at all.
Yeah. True creepy woman, crazy story.
This happened to me when I was 13 years old. I was a nerd. Studies were always my first priority. It was a sunny Monday afternoon when I returned home from school. I saw my parents getting ready for a party. My mum asked if I would join them. My answer was a big no because I had a math test, so I went upstairs to my room to start studying. After about half an hour later, my brother came to my room and told me that they were leaving. I closed the door and waved them goodbye through my window, and then closed the curtains. About 45 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. I got spooked at first. Then I thought I heard my mom telling me that the party got cancelled. She told me to come and have dinner with them. I denied. She repeated the question 3 times in every 15 minutes. The third time I told her to stop, and I was going to bed. After that, I went to sleep. At around midnight, my mom came into my room. I woke up from her silent footsteps. Then I apologized for shouting at her earlier. She was confused and told me that they returned just 15 minutes ago. I started panicking. My mom tried to calm me down and stayed next to me for the night. At around 2 a.m., there was the same knock on my door, telling me the same thing, but this time, furiously. I said enough was enough. I got up and I was about to open the door, but me and my mom froze. There were fighting sounds coming from the house, and when I opened the door, a woman with shabby clothes, a white face and a long hair was hitting my dad. My mom went ahead to call the police, but the woman catch my mom by her hair and threw her downstairs.
Ooh.
She then took out a knife and stabbed me. I fell unconscious after that. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital. My mom told me that my brother threw his skateboard at her head and she fell unconscious. They then called the police and an ambulance. The police reported that she was a famous mimicry artist. Apparently one day, she lost all her wealth and lost her mind. After losing her reputation and wealth, she started murdering people. I still remember her face.
True childhood horror story.
My name is Madison, and I am a 22-year-old woman. And this is a story that happened to me 11 years ago. I was an average 11-year-old, living comfortably in a 2-story house. We lived near a lake that had a park in front of it that I would always go play on. The walk wasn't far, maybe a 5-minute walk. I knew the area well and the people living in it, so my mom didn't have a problem with me walking there. Every time I would walk there, I would notice a man sitting on a bench, smiling at me. I didn't know his name, so for the sake of the story not being confusing, let's call him Mike. I was always creeped out by him because he would just sit there and watch me. I also noticed that
Jose on added you on Fort. Why he on added you on Fort? What happened?
He drove there and didn't live close by, which was odd because the park was closed off and only the people that lived in my area knew.
How you know if he added you or not?
About it. He would always keep an eye on me when I walked home too. One day I was going to the park and another man that I had seen before started following me. He began walking behind me every time I went to the park and home. I stopped going to the park because of that, but I eventually got bored. I lived on the 2nd story of my house and had a window in my bedroom leading to the roof. When I was bored, I would just go on top of the roof, which my mother always told me was dangerous and I could fall. This one time, not long after I stopped going to the park, I saw the same man that would follow me outside my house's fence, checking out my home. And Mike was standing close behind him. The man saw me and tried to jump the gate. I ran downstairs.
Yeah, because he tried to lie, say I cheated when I didn't.
To call the cops.
Tried to say I cheated on the game or whatever, and I was double teaming when I caught him lying.
He was now at my front door banging on it. The front door had a big window so we could see that the man was banging on it with a knife in his hands. My mom stayed on the phone with the cops, and I saw Mike running towards our house and jumping the gate.
You too. I'm about to get on the game soon.
Mike tackled that man and eventually knocked him out. We later found out that he kidnapped over 5 young girls in our area and killed them. Mike would always watch because he noticed that man before me and wanted to make sure that I was safe. I am forever grateful for Mike because without him, I probably wouldn't be here today.
So Acorns is a financial tech company, so I bought everyone's gifts today.
This happened to me back in the summer of 2015. The bus and the metro were always crowded with people, and it was kind of uncomfortable for me. So I would get a taxi to go to my school. On top of that, for personal reasons, I felt the taxi was a safer option for me. Until that year. I woke up at 6 a.m. as usual.
Don't matter.
After picking up my lunch bag, I said goodbye to my mom and sister and run towards the taxi. As soon as I got inside, I immediately sensed that something was a bit off. The taxi driver was a middle-aged man, maybe around his 50s. He had markings all over his skin and wide open eyes. And I could see his mouth was full of scratches. He even looked and smelled like he didn't take a shower for a long time. Although all of his behavior gave me goosebumps, I tried to ignore it. He then started driving his car so fast that I felt like someone was chasing him. While he was driving frantically, he tried to talk to me about school, but I kept giving him short answers. When we were finally close to the school, he didn't slow down and I was terrified. Finally, I realized that this man is not fit to be a driver at all. I opened the window and desperately screamed for help. All of a sudden, he took his pocket knife out and stabbed me in the leg. I felt a sharp pain in my leg, but didn't stop yelling for help. I don't remember when, but I passed out. When I woke up again, I was still in the same car, but the driver wasn't there anymore. I could see police cars and cops around the taxi. It turns out that some of my classmates saw me in the taxi getting far away from school, so they ended up calling 911. And the police ran after his car and eventually arrested him. After the commotion, the ambulance took me to a hospital with my mom and sister by my side. My leg was in a horrible condition that I needed surgery, so I had to stay for a week in the hospital. To this day, I still got the scar on my leg, and whenever I think of that incident, my heart drops. I wonder what would have happened to me if my classmates didn't see me in the taxi that day. When I was 11 years old, My dad took me and my sisters to this very nice house in the middle of nowhere. It was very scary, and the neighbors had a weird vibe. When night fell, I looked out the window and I could see a scary old lady with her face all bloody right in front of my window, looking at me. She was making crying baby noises. I brushed it off as my dad or my sisters playing a prank on me. The next day when I was going to bed, I saw the same lady, but this time in my room. I screamed, but she grabbed me. I was able to run to the bathroom. My dad and my sisters couldn't hear my screams. I thought I was going to die, but I had my phone with me, which barely had any signal. And my 911 call was keep breaking off. But thankfully, the police came. They took down the woman, handcuffed her. Later they told us that the woman is a child predator. And apparently she was living in my dad's shed. And none of us realized it.
Oh no.
You may not realize that there is a world that you're not even aware of. After all, the Earth is still not a place that has been fully discovered. I used to love traveling. A year ago, I left for the Amazon, driven by passion. Me and the crew that I was in were excited to make a special documentary film exploring remote areas. But the things that I saw, that thing that I saw, you have to understand that I can't describe how terrifying that thing was. I was lucky to be alive. I don't know how I survived, or how I came back home. My memories, they were all gone. I barely recovered from my wounds. After that, I had psychotherapies as well as medical treatments, and through those I was able to recover my lost memory. It was day 10 of the expeditions in the Amazon. We kept going deeper into the forest. The Amazonian Indians in the area told us strongly not to go deeper. So we decided to dispatch only 3 out of the 10 members of the crew to the place. And as you can guess, I was one of the 3. The rest remained in the village. And it was us 3, walking deeper into the jungle. The environment was just like a sci-fi movie, full of enormous trees, plants, and huge insects. In that majestic nature, it felt like I was going back to the Mesozoic era. It was fantastic, at least up until that moment. As we went deeper, the plants and insects around us got bigger and bigger, and Mark, one of the members, became agitated. He said he wanted to turn back, but me and Victor persuaded him to keep going. We had a goal at that time, to film this documentary and make history with our findings. It wasn't just Mark. We all knew that it was dangerous, but there was no wondering why he freaked out that much. Because there were fist-sized insects and humongous snakes wandering around us. I was holding a big machete, so did Victor, but for no avail. None of us could see beyond our noses because of the plants. After walking for a long time, we finally reached the swamp. There we saw a massive alligator. I was freaked out, but the excitement filled its place. While I was staring at the alligator, I noticed Mark was having a panic attack. He couldn't even catch his breath. It seemed like he was going to have a heart attack, overwhelmed with extreme fear. He kept mumbling, "We're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die." Although, even if the alligator would attack us, we could defend ourselves, since we not only had machetes, but guns too. But fortunately, it didn't even move the muscle. It was just staring at us. So we kept moving forward. What happened after that is the real stuff of horrors. Looking back on this now, that was just unbelievable. It was only then, when I heard a loud bang of a gun and screaming, I realized I got knocked down and my head was in the mud. I began to feel an immense pain within my body, and I realized my arm was broken. The camera that I was holding were also completely destroyed. It was too painful for me to even move an inch. Right there and then, I heard the most frightening screams of a creature that I had never heard before.
More kicks of flavor.
Of course it's an ad right after this, bro.
More to love. Tyson.
Higher interest rates and greater volatility define the new regime.
That ear-splitting sound made me imagine how massive that being could be. It was so tremendous that it echoed through the entire forest. I barely raised my head and turned towards the sound, and I saw Victor shooting his gun at something. At first glance, I couldn't recognize it clearly because my vision was blurry due to dizziness. But as it got clearer, I saw what it was. A green, giant insect.
Alright, bro.
It was
see?
a mantis. A
cap.
giant mantis.
Cap.
It seemed to be almost 9 feet tall. I still couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was probably hit by that mantis and flown away, fell into the mud. Mark was nowhere to be seen, and Victor was firing his gun frantically, but it didn't even faze the mantis. Suddenly, it rushed at Victor and violently stabbed his neck, and I saw Victor's head flying away in front of my eyes. After the death of Victor, the mantis slowly raised its head, looking at me. When we were staring at each other, I was paralyzed by fear. I still don't forget those eyes. They were just as big as a human's head, and I could see myself reflected through them. The mantis screeched in a very high pitch. I thought it was gonna kill me, but it didn't. It just flew off. I couldn't breathe due to fear, and even felt suffocated. When I got myself together, I heard a voice. Help me. It sounded very feeble, but I knew it was Mark's voice. I started searching for him, following his weak cries of help, and found him stuck under a large tree, waist down. The place was completely devastated. It was like a battlefield. Everything was destroyed. Mark was barely breathing. I tried helping him, get him out under that tree, but my broken arm didn't let me. Mark and I looked at each other. He stared at me, no hope in his eyes, and closed them. With teary eyes, I started to walk away. I kept moving, hearing the distant screeches of the monster. After hours of walking, I finally got back to the village where the crew resided. They were sitting, and when they saw me, the open wounds on my head and my broken arm, they got up, rushing towards me, and then I collapsed. It was at that moment I lost my memories. They apparently wanted to go look for the others. The chief of the tribe didn't allow them to go. Being unconscious, I couldn't tell them what happened to me, to Mark, or to Victor. They then gathered the equipment and patched me up the best way they could, and we left the Amazon to go back home. I wish these memories stay that way. Now that I have them back, I can't fall asleep. And even if I do, I wake up drenched in sweat. The death of those people right in front of my eyes haunts me. And that scream. This story happened very recently, when my cousin came to visit me and my family.
Cousin is prison. That's okay.
We had so much fun until he came into my room, leaving the door open, and we were alone in there. Just to give you an idea of how my house is shaped, my room is connected to the living room, and the living room is connected to my parents' room. The kitchen is within the living room since our house is small. Now let's get back to the story. Everything started when I had to take my medication and lay in my bed to relax. My cousin was acting normally at first, playing with me and the toys in my room, but after 10 minutes of me taking the medication, he started acting weird. At first he was just screaming. After all, he is a 4-year-old, so he can't really speak. I thought it was because I was just laying there, watching 1Z videos on my phone. But then he started biting me really hard on my hand.
What the fuck?
I warned him that I would punish him if he ever do that again, but he did something more sinister. He got on my back and started to strangle me. I was confused. He is a sweet child who've always been so kind to me. He always kissed me and hugged me, but now this was happening. Of course, my first reaction was to punch him in the elbow so that he would stop what he was doing. When he stopped, we looked at each other and I saw his eyes filled with anger and hatred towards me. He whispered something which I couldn't hear, but then, all of a sudden, he started hugging me and playing with me. After about 2 hours, he and his parents left. But this story doesn't end here. Earlier today, my grandmother invited us, my cousin, and his parents to her house. We got there, laughed and played. After that, me and my cousin decided to play hide and seek, and he was the seeker in the first round. He started counting, and I hid in my grandfather's room behind the door. The room is small, and there's a light switch right where I hid, and next to the place that I hid is a wooden desk. So I was hiding there, and after a while he found me. The next round I was the seeker. Since he is 4 years old, he would gasp or chuckle when I got near him, which would give out his position, but I always acted like I didn't know where he was. And I did the exact same thing today. When I learned where I was hiding, I went to the other side of the house where I hid before, just to play along. While I was walking, I looked through the window of the place where I hid, because he was able to see me through there. But what I saw in my grandfather's room shocked me. There was a girl.
What the fuck?
Sitting down with her hair in front of her face. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, she was gone.
It's always when I close my eyes.
I brushed it off as being my imagination because the day before that I watched the horror movie Ring. Immediately after that, I went back and got him out of the place he was hiding. We stopped playing hide and seek because of that girl and went directly to the living room. While sitting, he got distracted by something. I followed his gaze, but saw nothing. He then walked towards the place he was looking at. And after about 15 seconds, he came back screaming. He was scared by something, and I feel like I know what that thing was. The adults wanted to know why he was screaming, but I just told them that he was probably bored, putting the pieces together.
Dumbass.
I think I know what's going on. I think my cousin is somehow possessed by that girl. We both saw that girl. I know we did. That is the reason why he was screaming. I just hope nothing happens to him. And I hope that girl will leave him alone.
Feel free to hire better, faster with Bamboo HR. Click below.
Always gonna be connected. And you'll always be my best friend.
My friend doesn't allow anyone inside her home after 9:30 p.m. I actually found out why. Oh shit, okay, I want to know
The
this.
happiest couple I've ever met. The couple to give hope to anyone who didn't believe in love. Came crashing down from their happy, cloudless blue sky. And it all began with an old, bitter woman. I arrived at JC's house 5 p.m. sharp. She's always obsessing with time, questioning why you're a minute late or a minute early. As if she's a detective and you're in her interrogation room. A young woman with pitch black hair, dark clothing, a nose ring and a few tattoos to go with it all. Her home decorated not too differently from herself, with pumpkins sitting on the porch in September, black wind chimes, and a very welcoming rug at the doorstep that reads, "Leave now." I felt special being the only person she trusted. Still, it took me a few knocks and even a reluctant ring of the doorbell to get her to answer. "Hey," I began, ending the awkward stare down she always initiated when that door opened. "Ralph," she said, smiling. "How you doing? Good? Good. Yourself?" She took a moment to trace the floor with her left foot. "Good. JC and I had planned a movie night. Well, as long as the movie wasn't too long, as she never allows anyone, even me, inside her home after 9:30 p.m. My nostrils were introduced to a scent of fresh batch of cinnamon cookies. I'd hoped that they were for me, for us, but JC brought back a bowl of popcorn and soda for the movie instead. Which was fine. I certainly wasn't going to complain and then end up losing her trust for the next 2 decades. The movie ended. We thought Halloween 2 was okay. I gave myself a little tour while JC went upstairs to find another movie. I was glad she was willing to watch another. That she was beginning to open up and let her friends back into her life. Guess the burden from all the loneliness she's been experiencing the past few years finally got to her.
My eye caught a picture framed above the fireplace of JC and her ex-boyfriend, Tyler. No one knows what happened between them. All we know is that one day they were together, and the next day they weren't. After the breakup, Tyler simply disappeared, and no one's seen him since. And the aftermath shows. It shows in JC's eyes. Saw 4? JC waved the DVD from atop the stairs, awaiting my response. Sure. Somehow, over and despite the gore of Saw 4, she slowly drifted into a deep sleep. I wasn't really paying much attention to the movie anyway, so that was fine. And it was about time for me to leave soon. I made myself over to the kitchen for a glass of water. I noticed the time, 9:15 p.m. I thought I'd better get going soon, even if JC wasn't going to wake up in the next 15 minutes. I told myself I would wake her up before I left out of respect for her rules. I noticed a tray of cinnamon cookies on the counter, and figured she wouldn't notice one missing anyway. I looked down the hallway before turning the sink on to see if JC's still asleep. I didn't want to make too much of a noise washing my hands, but it wasn't the sound of running water that woke her up. It was my scream. As I washed my hands, I made out a face of a man in the window in front of the sink. I jumped back in shock, with JC running into the kitchen with questions. What happened? She demanded to know. Call the cops. I think someone tried to break into her house. I saw him through the window by the sink. What did he look like? I don't know. Definitely a man though. I think he was white. She burst out in a sudden laughter. No more movies tonight, Ralph. Time to go. She didn't believe me, or she wasn't taking it seriously.
Nah, what the fuck?
I'm not leaving you here. You're not staying here alone. I'll be fine. Not happening, I sternly interrupted. JC finally noticed the time. Her expression suddenly turned serious, and she uncrossed her arms. Oh, no, Ralph. You have to go. Now. I poked my head to the side, looking out the kitchen. I saw the same men through the living room window this time. Holy shit! Call the cops, he's right there! JC looked back. She saw him too. A very loud and violent bang against the door rumbled throughout the house. She ran for the front door to make sure it was locked. Except, she actually ran to the front door so I wouldn't look through the peephole. Move! What are you doing? We gotta see this guy's face so we can describe him. Ralph, what? Move! Ralph, please. Confusion hit me. Why won't you move, JC? Tears run down her face.
What the fuck?
Followed by trails of black eyeshadow. She seemed hopeless. Like she had just given up. Like she was finally ready to tell me something. Ralph, do you remember that old woman? The one, Tyler and I. She dried her face with her sweater. The one me and Tyler visited. Yeah, okay, what about her? JC and Tyler were as open-minded as they come. They dipped their toes into diverse pools of knowledge. Knowledge in religion, culture, science, you name it. They studied Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and anything else that sparked their interest. Which is why, at the request of a former friend, they decided to meet with a woman who claimed to possess certain abilities. A very old, serious, grey-haired woman whose shoulders almost met the back of her neck. This woman lived up in the mountains, in absolute isolation. Although open-minded and always willing to listen, JC and Tyler couldn't help but laugh at the woman, who claimed to be one of the last people on Earth who knew how to practice real witchcraft. The woman did not react mercifully at their mocking, and supposedly proved to JC and Tyler that she was in fact very real. It was a running joke that JC would tell us from time to time, even when Tyler left. They broke up immediately after meeting that old woman. But no one thought that it was their reasoning. JC. She looked up at me, still leaning against the door. What about the woman? What the hell does she have to do with anything that's happening right now?
Right.
The tears started again. Then another very, very loud bang against the door. It was so strong that it rattled the locks and even shook some picture frames on the wall out of place. Holy shit! Okay, JC, move, please! I moved her away from the door to look through the peephole. Ralph, please!
I saw the stuff of nightmares. A man on the ground, standing on all fours. That is, standing on his legs and hands. His crooked head looking up at the door, shifting fast. Shifting inhumanely fast. His eyes were pitch black, like JC's hair. And he was completely naked, with his ribcage poking against his skin. He was standing so close to the door that I was able to see every little detail. Then he, or it, opened its mouth to reveal cat-like teeth. I jumped back as it began to bang its head against the door again. I looked at JC, waiting for an explanation. She just looked back at me, as if expecting me to figure out myself, like I was supposed to know. Then she ran to the kitchen, and she came back with a tray of cinnamon cookies she had baked earlier. She placed her hand on the doorknob and looked at me. They're still his favorite. What are you doing? Don't open the door! She opened the door and walked outside, closing it behind herself.
Oh, but she ate one, so it's only one
then
left.
Run to the living room
I mean,
to get a better
so
look
he might
through
get
the window.
mad that
she was
it's
feeding it
missing
the
one.
cookies and petting it on the head. It rubbed against her legs. She kissed it on its forehead while it consumed everything she placed in front of it. Then, in a sight that made me jump back from the window, it suddenly ran off into the woods, moving incredibly fast. I just stared at JC as she walked back inside. She froze by the staircase, still waiting for me to say something. By then, it just hit me. Tyler always did like those cookies.
What'd you do? What did you do to them?
He's experimenting on people.
History is
Oh,
lines we must be willing to cross. That's compassionate use.
that's the boyfriend. Oh, that's the boyfriend, bro. That's the boyfriend.
So, I'm a big horror fangirl. I'm 20 years old, and over the past year, I've been collecting from the figures to the mask to even life size.
Puppet Master Michael Myers. I know my
I
horror.
won't say this story was terrifying or anything.
Where's that pinhead?
But to
No, it's
me,
not pinhead.
it basically saved me. I'll try and make it simple. I'm a big Michael Myers fan, and last October I bought a life-size figure of him. Oh, and a Chucky doll too. And not just one of the cheap ones, the replica-looking ones. Some may call me crazy, but what's not to love about horror, right? I keep everything stored away at the moment, apart from the life-size Michael, which he stands around 6 foot. He's not a cheap-looking guy either. He looks like the real deal. The replica mask, real coveralls with blood, and even a knife too. He stands in my room right next to my bed.
Alright, see,
And even though it used to creep me out seeing a dark black figure in my room, I eventually got used to it. Like to the point where I actually felt comfortable around him. I don't move him anywhere else though, as nobody in the house really liked him. Anyway, now that that's all out of the way, here's the thing that happened. So last year when I received him, I was home alone watching films downstairs when I then heard a thud upstairs. I froze, as I didn't really know what to think. I slowly got up and went up to my room, and then instantly heard the thuds from the downstairs door. I had absolutely no clue what the hell was going on because I was the only one there. I quietly sat in the dark as I didn't keep the lights on, and I listened. I heard what sounded like men talking, and then I realized someone came in and that I didn't lock the door. The TV was also left on, so they had to have known I was there. Anyways though, there I was sitting face to face with the Michael figure in the dark. I heard the footsteps coming up the stairs to my room while I sat in the corner with my head spinning. I felt like I wanted to pass out. I even started to sweat a little. My door then opened and there I'd seen a hooded figure walk in and head straight towards me. He had something in his hand, something sharp, like a pocket knife. I was leaning against the cold wall more and more, wanting to grab something, until out of nowhere, Michael's arm then started moving.
What the fuck?
Bear in mind it was still dark, so this guy had no clue that Michael was behind him until he heard it move. I also want to add that it wasn't an electrical noise. It was the material of the arm rubbing together. The man then turned around and instantly yelled. And I mean, I've never seen a man run so fast in his life. The man then started yelling, "Go! Get the hell out of here!" to some other guy that was in a van outside. I stood up and watched them as they drove off. I then noticed a crack in my window. Obviously these freaks were throwing rocks in my window, possibly to distract me, but I didn't care about that. I turned around and just stared at Michael because I really had no clue that he could even move. I started investigating and then realized he was an animatronic the entire time. But I was thinking he moved just at that exact moment and basically saved my life that night. I can even laugh about it now because of how scared the guy was. I got my window repaired and did mention to the police that I had a break-in, but there was really nothing they could do about it. But it was still reported just in case they tried anywhere else. Luckily nothing was taken, as there was really nothing valuable downstairs. Obviously this Michael Myers looked like a real person, and anyone that looks at it, especially in the dark, gets the creeps by it. I know it sounds insane and maybe even funny, but this incident really happened, and I'm so damn thankful that I have him in my room. I never even once thought it would save my life like this, especially if he never moved. I always wonder how he moved anyway. I mean, it happened all by itself. Was it some kind of coincidence? I'll never know. But thank you, Michael. God only knows what that guy would have done to me if you weren't here.
Scary Uber.
21-year-old Samantha Josephson grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey as the daughter of Seymour and Marcy Josephson.
This is a real thing.
21-year-old Samantha Josephson grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey as the daughter of Seymour and Marcy Josephson. While majoring in political science at the University of South Carolina, Samantha studied abroad in Barcelona and planned on attending the Drexel University School of Law after her 2019 graduation. Samantha was a girl who showed boundless potential, who was potentially looking at a partial scholarship to Rutgers, but all her dreams would be snuffed out after making just one fatal mistake. On the evening of March 28, 2019, Samantha went out drinking with friends at the Bird Dog Bar in downtown Columbia. At around 2 a.m., they decided to call it a night, and like so many of us have done before, Samantha pulled out her phone and ordered an Uber. Just 9 minutes later, surveillance footage from the Bird Dog shows a black Chevrolet Impala pulling up outside. Samantha steps outside, enters the vehicle, and greets her driver. The man at the wheel was named Nathaniel Rowland. And although he didn't say anything as Samantha climbed into his car, he hadn't actually been expecting a passenger. You see, the car that Samantha had climbed into wasn't her Uber.
Oh.
It was just a similar-looking vehicle she'd drunkenly mistaken for her ride.
Oh, shit.
You'd expect Roland to ultimately tell her to get out of the car, but he didn't. He simply engaged the locks, trapping Samantha inside, then drove off. It's not clear whether or not Samantha realized her mistake before Roland stopped the vehicle, but at some point, Roland parked up his Impala, pulled out a knife, and inflicted a sustained and savage attack upon the terrified Samantha. Using a bizarre-looking two-bladed knife, Roland proceeded to stab Samantha 120 times. She attempted to shield herself, but she was trapped, and Roland was armed. As well as several horrific defensive wounds, Roland also stabbed Josephson in the head with so much force that the knife went through her skull to her brain. But the killer blow seems to have come when he stabbed her in the carotid, one of two main arteries that carries blood to the brain. Samantha also sustained wounds to her face, neck, shoulder, torso, back, lung, leg, and feet, bleeding out within just 10 to 15 minutes. Roland then dumped Samantha's body in the New Zion field, where she was discovered by a handful of local turkey hunters. The following morning, Samantha's roommates became deeply concerned when they found she hadn't returned home. Police rushed into action, easily tracing her last known whereabouts to the Bird Dog Bar and to Nathaniel Rowland's black Chevy Impala. Officers later happened across Roland while he was out driving, and after a traffic stop was attempted, Roland jumped out of the stationary vehicle and began to flee. Inside his car, police officers found a container of liquid bleach, germicidal wipes, and a bottle of window cleaner. But perhaps the most incriminating piece of evidence was Samantha's phone, which Roland had foolishly chosen to keep. He was arrested, questioned, and tissue samples were taken. Disturbingly, the tissues under Roland's nails tested positive for Samantha's DNA, meaning whatever
These are like the worst criminals ever.
he was doing after he'd killed her, it had been rigorous enough for particles of her skin to become embedded under his nails. Roland was soon charged with Samantha's kidnap and murder, and it became apparent that Samantha wasn't his first kidnapping victim. He had apparently carjacked a woman at a stoplight in October of 2018 and was extremely violent in the commission of the crime, beating her and threatening her before they drove to an ATM to almost empty her bank account.
How can you trust the reviews you're reading? Introducing FakeSpot by Mozilla.
In July of 2021, Roland was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering, with a judge sentencing him to life in prison. The same judge, a veteran of the legal circuit, said the murder was perhaps the most heartless and severe he'd ever seen, denying Roland's request for leniency. It's also easy to see why. Roland displayed some horrifying predatory behavior. When a stranger accidentally climbs into their car, most correct-thinking people simply laugh it off, perhaps getting a little prickly if they're in a bad mood. But Roland found a stranger climbing into his back seat, and his first thoughts were nothing short of bloodthirsty. Samantha Josephson made an honest and simple mistake, and Nathaniel Roland made her pay with her life.
A little bit of context. I'm a 27-year-old female, and I live alone with my dog. I purchased my home in December of 2019, so I'm still a bit new to the neighborhood. My neighbor to the left of me is a sweet old man named Leo, and we really get along quite well. We were chatting one afternoon, and he was giving me the inside scoop on all of the neighbors. He was the first house on the block, so he knows pretty much everything about everyone. When we got to talking about the man who lives on the right side of me, let's call him Tom, well, Leo seemed to become hesitant. Leo then said, "Well, you know that Tom was involved with that group that murdered that librarian, right?" Obviously very confused, I told Leo that I wasn't really sure what he meant, and I asked him what happened. I'm not sure if Leo just regretted telling me in that moment, or if his hearing is just bad and he didn't hear my question. Regardless, he immediately changed the subject, and I didn't dare pressure him to elaborate. After our conversation, I thought about the little that I know about Tom. He's tall with graying hair and seems to keep to himself. When I first moved in, I was honestly a bit concerned for him because I never saw any lights on in his home. Every single blind was pulled down consistently, and his old truck rarely ever left his driveway. He's also the only one on our street with a privacy fence surrounding his backyard. Total red flags looking back now. Later that night, I decided to do a bit of research, trying to figure out what Leo had mentioned. And, well, it didn't really take long for me to stumble across the news article. One of the most gruesome murders in the county, it read. I read articles upon articles and full court documents all about the violent murder of a middle-aged woman. It turns out that when Tom was a young adult living in the next county over, he and his friend attempted to rob a neighbor by breaking into her home during the daytime, but she unfortunately caught them in the act. Instead of fleeing the scene, however, Tom's friend then knocked her out cold with a bottle. Afterwards, Tom beat her skull in with a baseball bat. The friend slit her wrists.
What?
The men then stole her car and were later arrested after they ended up crashing it due to icy road conditions. When the deceased woman's son came home from school, he said that his mother looked completely unrecognizable. Tom's lawyers tried to plead insanity with the help from his family, who put forth evidence of Tom's erratic behavior as a child, even once pulling a knife on his own mother. Although the insanity plea was unsuccessful, Tom still ended up serving a pitiful amount of time in prison for what I see as the most disturbing role in the murder. Tom's friend was released in 2016. They didn't receive life sentences because of some weird discrepancy with the initial robbery being done during the daytime and not at night, which is absolutely ridiculous and shows just how crooked our criminal justice system really is. After finding all of this out, I've only had one interaction with Tom. I was going to take the trash out, and his dog, who was chained up in front of his house, then lunged at me while barking like crazy. Tom came and took the dog and apologized. I absolutely love dogs, and I wasn't upset by this, and I told him it was totally fine. Not that I would have argued with him anyways. I've interned in a jail before, and I've had conversations with inmates who were on trial for murder. So I'm not necessarily intimidated easily, and I do believe in the possibility for a criminal to reintegrate into society and then be successful after proper therapy. But something about a convicted murderer living directly next to you just really hits different.
When I was 11 years old, my dad was maybe no time for escaping each other.
This wasn't my first paranormal experience, but I can say that this story is one of the most horrifying experiences I've had. It was back in September of 2010. My grandma was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. It was Sunday when I first encountered this lady wearing a black gown. I was home alone at the time, since our family goes to my uncle's farm every Sunday. My brother and I were raised by our grandma and aunt. I was reading a book. My bedroom's door was open. I could see the living room outside and the screen door that leads to our garage. Suddenly, I felt a cold wind that seemed to surround me within my room. That wasn't normal, as our AC wasn't on, and all the windows in our house, including those in my room, were all completely shut. I looked into the living room, and there I saw her, the lady wearing a black gown. She looked to be around her 40s, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, so I froze and I stared at her. She wasn't looking at me. She seemed to be walking. No, she seemed more like she was floating. She proceeded to go through the living room door that led to the garage.
We know things don't quite add up right now.
Bro, 15 minutes.
We lowered the price on hundreds of your...
Come on, bro.
I didn't yet tell anyone in our family what I encountered that day, since they've always been skeptic and didn't believe in the paranormal. Little did I know, that was the day that started my sleepless nights. My grandma's bed was soon moved to that living room, since she liked watching the TV there until she went to sleep. The main bathroom is also more accessible there. So whenever I'd wake up late at night to go to the bathroom, I would turn off the television for her if she was sleeping. It's always been just me and her at the house during those times, since my brother stayed at our aunt's house, which was just beside ours. That first night after seeing the lady, I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and I turned off my grandma's TV like I always do. When I was on my way back to my room, I passed my grandma's bed, and that's when I noticed there was a woman standing next to her bed. It was the lady wearing a black gown, the same one from before. She was just standing there. It seemed like she was guarding my grandma. She wasn't even looking at me. I got so scared, I rushed and went to my room and locked my door. I slept with the light on that night. The following night, I told my grandma that I was going to sleep beside her that night. I was scared that this lady would do something to hurt her. She asked me why, so I simply said I wanted to sleep beside her like I did when I was a kid, and she agreed. My grandma fell asleep, so I turned off the TV. I didn't get enough sleep the night before, so I fell asleep too, But it didn't last long. I woke up, and there she was, standing next to my grandma's bed, but with a bit of distance this time. I panicked, but I didn't want to wake my grandma, so I ran to my room, turning on the light, but I left the door open to make sure nothing happened to my grandma, just in case. Days passed, and I still had sleepless nights. I always felt that there was someone inside my room with me, but there wasn't anyone there. The woman wearing a black gown was always guarding my grandma, standing next to her bed every single night. Weeks passed, and she would still be there. One day, my aunt hired a nanny for my grandma to help her with her needs. My aunt requested that she slept on the couch near my grandma's bed for a few nights, so she did. I couldn't help but worry about her, so I told her of my encounters with the woman in the black gown. Of course, she didn't take me too seriously, and told me it's just your imagination, since I was 16 years old at the time. I didn't say anything more and just left her to her business. The next day, morning came, and we were about to have breakfast. I saw the nanny, and she looked as if she didn't get any sleep. She looked at me and said, I saw her. She seemed to be very scared. She asked my aunt if she could go home every night to sleep at their house instead. When my aunt asked why, the nanny replied she couldn't sleep well at our house, so my aunt obliged. My days stayed the same. The lady in the black gown was still there, and I wouldn't get any sleep at all. I think I even got sick due to lack of sleep. I was also in high school at the time, so it was hard for me. One morning, I was having breakfast with my aunt, and she asked how I was doing. She said that I looked sick, so I spilled everything. I told her about the woman wearing a black gown, standing next to Grandma's bed every single night. This time she looked like she was convinced. She knew I was someone who loved to sleep, someone who rarely got sick. Grandma came to have breakfast with us, and she looked annoyed. My aunt asked what was up, and my grandma looked at me and said, "Why were you going inside and out the living room to go to the bathroom last night? I couldn't sleep, and you wouldn't listen when I asked you to stop." My aunt and I looked at each other. My aunt was shocked. I hadn't gone to the bathroom last night, since I felt really sick. So who was it? I didn't tell this to Grandma, so I simply apologized. Months passed, and I got used to the apparition, since she really didn't do any harm, and I didn't want it to affect my lifestyle anymore. The strange thing was, I still had this feeling that there was someone in my room with me, and that feeling would not go away. And something told me that energy wasn't the same energy that came from the lady in black. Every time I tried to sleep or close my eyes, even for a second, I felt as if there was going to be a face right in front of mine. So I always tried to stay awake. It was terrible. I was getting very sick, so my brother decided that he'll sleep on the couch next to my grandma for the next months. He was a cat lover and brought all 6 of his cats with him, which we all loved dearly. That night, I bid him and my grandma good night and closed my door. I fell asleep right away, but after a few minutes, I woke up with my pillow being pulled. I opened my eyes, and I didn't move, but I still felt the pillow being dragged from my head. I froze. I was shocked and terrified. Suddenly, my brother yelled, "Hey, wake up! Get out of your room!" I snapped out of it, ran and opened my door. There, all 6 cats were sitting right in front of my doorway, surrounding it. I looked over at my brother and I was about to cry. I ran to him, and before I could even say anything, he told me, "Don't sleep in there." My cats were never this bothered, and ever since you closed your door, they just sat there. That's usually not a good sign. I felt scared, so I yelled out and called to you. I cried and told him what happened. He believed me. He told me I could sleep in his room for the night, and he'll stay with my grandma. So I did.
It's a long ass story for no reason, bro.
I never did see what gave me that dreadful feeling in my room, or the thing that pulled my pillow. But I'm glad it's over. As for the lady wearing a black gown, she did disappear when my grandma was getting better. It's been 11 years. 4 years ago, my brother passed away. But my grandma did survive cancer, and she's still around.
It's time for Atlantis to reveal itself.
Alright, y'all. It was a good little stream. Like it. Thank y'all for supporting me, tuning in, showing up. See y'all.